Hey guys! Today we're gonna start recapping the manhwa. It's time to change the genre. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. It really helps us be able to post more videos. I really like this manhwa a lot. It gives a nice twist to the classic transmigrator type of story, being that the main lead actually possesses a character who is a villain type in the original plot. And not gonna lie, the fact that the male lead is the Prince Charming handsome type of character really doesn't hurt at all. So, let's dive right into the story. The chapter begins with a handsome blonde and lilac-eyed young man standing before his fallen enemies. This is how the novel, The Owner of the Winter Forest, ends, with the main character, a grown-up Luca Winterwald, finally taking revenge on his distant family for taking away everything from him as he grew up, as they wanted to threaten him into renouncing his dukedom. Our female lead got hit by a car in her original world, and transmigrated into this novel in the form of Luca's abusive aunt, Judith, who in the original novel ends up murdered by Luca when he starts getting revenge on everyone who caused him harm. However, she transmigrated to a point of the novel where Luca is a cute 9-year-old boy under her care, as both his parents had passed away. The main lead is actually a big fan of this story, and so she knows that if she continues the flow of the novel, she will most definitely die. So instead, she decides to change the plot so as to prevent Luca's revenge towards her in the future. Moreover, she doesn't wish to be the abusive aunt the original novel intended for her character. She knows she can't change the whole novel, but she will do her best to survive as Judith. We see that Luca and Judith have poor living conditions, leaving poor Luca to earn his own food, only an apple and some bread a day, from doing small errands around the village. Luca has been living with Judith for 5 years now, right after Luca's mom, Judith's sister, died. Judith was really abusive towards Luca, as she had developed an inferiority complex regarding her looks. And as Luca grew and became increasingly beautiful, her complex was triggered. Now the main character is trying to improve Luca's living environment. She cooks for him, tends to him, and tries to get involved by taking walks and such. But Luca is extremely distant. I mean, who can blame him? Now Judith is tending for Luca, who has fallen ill. They don't have money for medicine, so she picks out some herbs to trade the apothecary for the medicine Luca needs. Her plan is to give Luca a year of good memories with her until his family comes looking for him. When that happens, she will live peacefully hiding from Luca's blood relatives. Judith is run over by a noble's carriage while picking up herbs. She is okay, but obviously a bit infuriated that the carriage didn't even stop. Once in the village, Judith runs into a man who seems to recognize her, asking her if she came to look for another guy. You can imagine Judith's dismay. This man, let's call him Potato Head, won't stop harassing Judith. She clearly has no interest in him and leaves it pretty clear to him as well. She tries ignoring him, but he won't go away, and when she declines his invitation to the May festival because she has to tend to Luca, he gets unbelievably rude. He even goes as far as to openly insulting her. But our strong-minded Judith won't let any man talk to her like that. You go, girl. With a sassy retort, she leaves him speechless and running away in shame. Just moments after, Judith bumps into a nobleman and falls onto the ground. She is trying to avoid at all costs being noticed by this noble, who is trying to help her up, as she figures it will strain her plans to go unnoticed by Luke's wealthy blood relatives. She keeps her head down and runs away from him as quickly as possible, leaving the noble quite shocked at her reaction. She then bumps into a friend, Leah, who tells her the noble was actually looking for her and had asked her directions to Judith's house. Realization finally kicks in, and Judith finally works out that in fact it was today the day Luca's family came looking for him. But Judith's memories had gotten Luca's age wrong. Desperately, Judith rushes home to find the tall, handsome, black-haired noble knocking on her front door. Judith's first impression of the nobleman is that he is handsome as hell, and I personally agree. He introduces himself as Viscount Rudiger Winterwald Jackson, a colonel of the Rungat army. Judith has to be very careful because there is information she knows from reading the novel that her character shouldn't know. The Viscount asks her if she knows about Jonas Winterwald, Luca's biological father, and she has to pretend she doesn't know him as the original character had no clue of his existence. Luca was Jonas's bastard child that he had with Judith's sister. He left before he found out that he had a child. Years later, Luca's mother wrote to him telling him about Luca, but he just ignored them. After he passed from a riding accident, his brother, the Viscount, found the letter amongst his things and rushed to find Luca. Judith wants Luca to go with him as she remembers he acts as a guide, teacher, and almost like an adoptive father to him. And so she plans to discreetly accept his offer of taking Luca to the Winterwald mansion to meet his grandparents, who are looking forward to meeting him. However, she doesn't want to be too transparent, as she is supposed to be his aunt after all, and doesn't want to make it seem like she's dumping Luca on them. In trying to act discreetly, Judith tells the Viscount that it's too sudden and that it would be really hard to tell Luca. Given that Luca is sleeping, she suggests the Viscount comes the next day to talk to Luca directly, telling him she guesses he'll feel better after resting and taking his medicine. The Viscount agrees and leaves for the day. Now, all that's left for Judith is to try to depart from Luca in the best of terms, so as to prevent his revenge plot in the future. During dinner, as she watches cute little Luca gobble down his stew, she starts questioning whether she should send him to the palace after all. She knows from the novel that it will only be a painful experience for him living there, and it's even harder for her given that Luca has just started to open up to her. Over the last month, she has been caring for Luca. She really felt a bond form between them, and it pains her to see him go. Next day rolls over, and Luca meets his handsome uncle. However, Luca doesn't seem to be very fond of him. He is rude and shut off, telling his aunt they can't be related because they don't look alike, which is sorta true, TBH. Judith tells him that his uncle's family are nobles and that they can provide him with everything he should want. But sweet little Luca still asks her what will happen to her. When she tells him that she has to stay at home, he surprisingly runs over to her and hugs her strongly, calling her mom. I'm tearing up, you guys. Everyone is shocked at this. Judith tries to clear up the situation by telling Luca that she is his aunt, not his mom, but Luca still insists. Judith is extremely confused. She doesn't understand why Luca is behaving like this. The Viscount tells him that if in fact she is his mother, he couldn't possibly separate them, and so he offers Judith to go back to the castle with them. Dismayed, Judith tries to explain that she is in fact his aunt. The last thing she wants to do is go back to the castle, where at the end of the novel, Luca takes his revenge. However, every excuse she puts out is effectively terminated by Luca. He even goes as far as saying that he knows she wants to get rid of him to find a spouse on her own, leaving both Judith and the Viscount in utter shock. With a look of disappointment, the Viscount tells Judith that they can help her get a more suitable spouse if that's what she desires. Basically, he tells her that there are no limitations to what the Winterwald wealth can provide, and so any excuse she could possibly express, of course, other than Luca will grow up and kill us all, is destroyed within seconds. And so they all depart Judith's home in the Viscount's carriage. Right before leaving, Leah appears. In a bout of jealousy, she claims that she'll have a nobler husband than Judith, as she thought that the Viscount had proposed to her, and storms off. In light of this, the Viscount asks Judith if she's okay, but blushing, she hurries up the carriage telling him it's nothing. While in the carriage with Luca sleeping, the Viscount asks Judith if she really is Luca's biological mother. She hastily denies so, telling him she doesn't understand why Luca lied. However, the Viscount is extremely comprehensive, telling her it is obvious Luca loves her like a mother. Yeah, right. He then proceeds to tell her that he will be as a father to Luca as well, and they will raise him together as his parents. Blushing, Judith tells him to be more cautious with his words as he could be misinterpreted. However, dense as a wall, he doesn't seem to find the issue with his declaration of shared parenthood. They arrive at a commercial center where they will take a train for the rest of the ride to the castle. However, the Viscount tells them they should buy some necessities before boarding the train. Judith is excited as she remembers this scene from the books, where they bought young and cute Luca a lot of new clothes for him to wear. Nonetheless, there is an unexpected turn of event in which it is she that ends up having to try millions of dresses in front of both the Viscount and Luca. Judith is exhausted. The Viscount buys all of the dresses she's tried and then still insists on going to another store to get hats and boots. Judith can't believe this. She insists they start looking for things for Luca. She calls the Viscount Colonel, to which he insists that she call him by his name, Rudiger. Judith tries to make Rudiger end the shopping spree, telling him she feels it's a bit excessive for her. However, as dense as always, he tells her it doesn't seem that way to him, and so they shall keep on buying stuff for her. After getting a truckload of stuff for Judith, they pass on to get new clothes for Luca. With eyes gleaming with excitement, Judith proceeds to make Luca try outfit after outfit. However, it is not long until Luca rebels and asks to be able to pick his own clothes. Judith gets a bit dispirited, as she really wanted to pick new things for Luca. Luca tells her then it's because her taste in clothes is a bit unique. Shocked, she finally realizes why they didn't even let her pick her own clothes. They stay at a hotel for the night and will ride the final train next morning. Finally, next morning comes along, and they are at the station where a special wagon is being prepared for them. Judith remembers this part of the book and recalls Luca had been extremely curious and excited as it was his first time riding a train. However, to her surprise, this Luca seems to be really introverted and not showing any excitement at all. She figures it might be because he is shy of his uncle, and so she suggests herself that he go take a tour of the train. Luca accepts, but still doesn't seem to be excited at all. While the Viscount and Judith are alone, Judith tells the Viscount to address her by name as well, to which he replies by thanking her and telling her he is really excited for it, as he feels they are getting really close. I mean, I get he can be dense, but come on! Blushing, Judith tries to keep her head on her shoulders. She knows that whatever the words Rudiger might say to her, there won't even be the faintest chance of being with him. She remembers from the novel that he is strongly against marriage, even to the point that the Winterwald family removed him as a possible heir to the dukedom. Even more so, Judith is extremely confused as the type of things Rudiger is saying are way off the type of things his character in the novel would say. Luca returns from his tour, but has a sour expression on his face. Judith questions him about it, but he seems to be closed off to her. Suddenly, Judith remembers that in the original story, things started going bad for Luca in the train ride to the castle, as his first assassination attempt happened there. She remembers that the one to send the assassins had been Rudiger's uncle, the main villain of the story, Franz Birkenisch. In the novel, Rudiger was able to kill the assassin before anything bad happened, but they also lost any leads that may connect the incident with Franz. Coming back to the present, Judith is quite surprised when she notices that Luca can read, as she notices him reading the paper. When questioned about this, Luca flinches, as if caught in the act. He brushes it off as reading only letters, but Judith remembers that the character never taught him anything. Judith notices that Luca is reading a gossip paper and gets furious. She scolds him for reading that, and even scolds Rudiger for allowing Luca to read gossip, telling him it's bad for his emotional development. Gotta love a balanced upbringing. We stand. Judith produces a children's book from somewhere and gives it to Luca, who doesn't seem the least bit interested. Judith was, however, interested in the gossip paper, and so she promptly picked it up and began reading it. It basically talked about the Winterwald family and how everyone was desperate to be a part of it, as they had been the ones to get the railway building concession from the royal family. However, one of the catches was that the heir to the dukedom had to bear the royal blood as well. Jonas did, as the current duke had had him with a princess who died shortly after childbirth. Rudiger was the best result of the duke's marriage with the princess's lady-in-waiting, and so, as he bears no royal blood, he is not eligible to be the future duke. In the paper, they speculate about Rudiger becoming the next duke by engaging to a member of the royal family. Rudiger tells Judith to ask him directly any questions she may have, as the gossip papers are not reliable sources. And so, she promptly asks him about his presumed engagement with the princess. With a bit of annoyance, he replies that he is not going to get married to the princess, and that it's all speculation by gossipers. Judith remembers from the original novel that Franz wanted to kill Luca so badly because if it wasn't for him, he could have landed the dukedom just by marrying into royalty, as he was the nearest relative of the current duke aside from Rudiger. But Luca's appearance shattered his dreams of becoming duke, as Luca is both of royal blood and a direct descendant of the duke. Judith figures if she gets Rudiger to marry into royalty, she would be able to hit two birds with one stone, as Franz wouldn't even try to mess around with royalty. Rudiger asks Judith why she wants him to marry into royalty so badly, given that it would probably make it harder for Luca to become heir to the dukedom. However, Judith tells him that she doesn't care for that. She just wants Luca to grow up happily, and jokingly questions whether Rudiger brought them to the castle just to turn Luca into the future duke, to which Rudiger can only react by becoming flustered. They share a moment in which they pump each other up into becoming the best uncle and aunt for Luca, right when he interrupts them. On edge, he tells them to cut it, and scolds Rudiger for trying to hit on his aunt. She tells him it's not the case, and diverts the subject by telling him to read with her. Smart moves, sis. The chapter begins with Judith suffering from an upset stomach. It seems that in the original novel, the assassination attempt occurred while they were eating, but it never said when specifically, so she's been extremely nervous at every meal, which led to her now feeling ill. Rudiger offers to massage her hand, as there is a spot which helps upset stomachs if touched in the right way. Luca, seeing this, becomes a bit overprotective of his aunt and shoves Rudiger away, telling him he can take care of it himself. Judith is happy to see him worry about her, but realizes his hands are too weak for the massage to be effective, and so she asks Rudiger to help again, apologizing to Luca. Rudiger then proceeds to kneel beside her and take his glove off, taking her hand softly in his and massaging it. Judith, as we would, becomes extremely flustered. It is then a butler appears, asking about lunch service. Rudiger tells him to start preparing lunch, while Judith dozes off in Rudiger's soft massages. How she hasn't fallen for him already remains a mystery to me. Lunch arrives, and as Judith approaches the table, Luca stops her. It is then that the butler takes a rifle from the food cart and starts shooting at Luca. Horrified, Judith shields him with her body, and they are able to get behind some furniture before they get hit. Rudiger swiftly takes his gun out and starts defending them as well. Judith thinks that she should find a way to disarm the assassin without killing him so as to be able to expose his relationship with Franz, when Luca runs away from their safe spot. He runs directly at the assassin with a cutlery knife. Luckily, the rifle got jammed, but the attacker took out a sword. Luca was able to dodge the blade, but he fell to the ground after his knife impacted the sword. Judith runs after him, and as she gets to him, she shields Luca from the assassin's sword with her body, when Rudiger is able to hit the assassin in the arm. Judith's arm got a bit cut by the sword, but luckily, it's nothing serious. The assassin manages to start running away from the wagon, but Rudiger starts to run after him. Judith yells after him, telling him not to kill him as they have to question him. And so, without even needing to look, sexy, I know, Rudiger shoots him in the leg and stops him. However, the assassin keeps advancing and gets to a door, so to prevent him from getting off the train, Judith grabs a pepper shaker. Handy, I guess? And throws it at him. Well, good news is that Judith was able to hit the escaping assassin on the head. Bad news, the assassin wobbled over the rails and fell out of the moving train, which obviously resulted in his death. Poor girl can't get a break. Now they can't use him to link the assassination attempt back to Franz. Later, the three of them are back in their carriage when Luca, out of the blue, tells his aunt he doesn't want her to go with him to the Winterwald castle after all. Shocked, Judith tries to get an explanation for his change of heart, and after some deflection from Luca, he finally admits that he didn't intend for her to get hurt, much less cut by a sword, and that he doesn't want to put her in danger. That's when Judith blows up, reminding him that he also tried to run up to the attacker and giving him a full 1-hour lecture on how he should not put himself in danger like that. Judith has made up her mind. After the lecture, she informs him that she fully intends to go to the Winterwald castle as Luca's mother. Both Luca and Rudiger look at Judith perplexed. Luca asks her why she would like to present herself as his mother, and Judith tells him it's because it would give her more control over what went on regarding him than if she was his aunt. She means to be able to have a say in the estate if something like what happened just now with the assassin happened again. Rudiger agrees with her, telling Luca that it's not a bad idea at all. Once that's decided, Judith tries to coerce Luca into calling her mom, and he refuses profoundly. Their relationship is so cute. Judith notices it's snowing outside, and her eyes full of excitement calls Luca over to the window to watch the snow with her. She remembers this scene from the books and remembers Luca had originally been full of excitement himself, but now he seems to be uninterested in the snow. Judith brushes it off, thinking maybe he is shyer because of her presence there. Even so, kinda sus, don't you think? They finally arrive at the Winterwald castle, where a carriage driver is waiting at the train station to take them to the castle. The driver introduces himself to Luca as Hans. Judith doesn't seem to remember him from the novel, but then again, he's only a secondary character with a pretty common name. Hans marvels at Luca's resemblance to the late Jonas's, but his friendly approach toward Luca is soon cut in the root by Luca's cold and distant greeting. Judith then introduces herself to Hans as Luca's mother, effectively masking her nervousness. They arrive at the castle, and Judith gets a bit lost in thought staring at Rudiger's beauty. I mean, as we all would. When Rudiger asks her what she's looking at, she impulsively tells him she was admiring his handsomeness, which leaves him taken aback. Of course, she tries to salvage it by saying it was just a joke. Sure, hun. Sure. Once they enter the castle, Judith catches her first glance of Lady Sophia, Rudiger's mom and the current Duchess of the estate. She is absolutely intimidated by her, as Sophia exudes a cold and calculated aura, and she wonders how on earth she will be able to keep up with the facade that she is in fact Luca's mother and not his aunt. She remembers from the novel that while growing up, Sophia looked after Jonas more than she did her own biological son, Rudiger, as Jonas reminded her of the late Princess Sophia. That left poor Rudiger to grow up pretty alone. Anyways, later on, along with the Duke, they proceed to have dinner together. Judith is extremely nervous. She expects to be interrogated and bashed for being of lower status. To her surprise, Sophia seems to be very friendly, asking her about how it was like raising Luca alone and empathizing with her struggles. Of course, Judith has to lie, but is also quite surprised by Sophia's friendliness, as is Rudiger. We get a hint behind Sophia's friendliness. It's because she is grateful that thanks to Judith, Princess Vanessa's bloodline can continue. The interrogation continues, asking her if she has noble connections and from which side of the family she got her light violet eyes from. Judith guesses they came from her grandmother, but she doesn't know much about her. Surprisingly, Sophia seems to be a bit disappointed that Luca doesn't have Judith's eye color, even though he is the spitting image of Jonas. The Duke pretty much keeps to himself all dinner long. Sophia then talks to Luca, asking him what his favorite food is, to which he replies, sacre torte, a pretty fancy cake for his upbringing. She then suggests that they take Luca to the capital to introduce himself to the royal family. Sophia tells Judith she has to be dressed accordingly in order to go to the capital, and suggests she gets more clothes. Reliving flashbacks from the store, Judith insists Rudiger already got her so much, who is then scolded by his mother for not getting Judith any jewelry. Poor Rudiger can't get a break. Dinner ends and they are walking up the halls back to their rooms when Judith spots a portrait of late Princess Vanessa. Sadly, she notices she looks just like Luca, but has light purple eyes like herself. Remembering Sophia's comment during dinner, Judith saddens at the thought that Sophia doesn't really love Luca or love Jonas, but only Princess Vanessa's lineage. Luca is ushered to his room by a servant, while Rudiger leads Judith into hers. Once in Judith's room, Rudiger orders some tea and sits down on a sofa. He tells Judith he should have thought of the jewelry in advance, that it's his duty to make sure she has enough daily wear. Lucky Judith, am I right? However, humble Judith refuses, telling him that the Duchess's gift will be enough for her. Rudiger insists, telling her that the Winterwalds are famous for their mines and that a member of the family should have hundreds of jewelry sets at their disposal. Rudiger then tells her that, in any case, she could use them as a means of having money in the future. Judith surprises him by telling him that she doesn't intend on selling any of the gifts he gave her. This flatters him, to the point he even blushes a little. How cute! With a rosy look, he tells her he finally understands why his military colleagues were so troubled when thinking of gifts to give their girlfriends. That he finally understands how it feels to gift something to the woman he is courting. What the actual F, Rudiger? I mean, we know he is dense, but come on, how can he say that and expect no confusion to happen? Judith tries to clear things up as the maids have already begun rumoring all around them. Somehow, Judith convinces Rudiger to only get her 2 sets of jewels, one from himself and the other from the Duchess. The next day, we are introduced to the butler of the mansion, Vincent, who then tells Judith to pick a personal maid from a row of girls. She picks an innocent-looking brown-haired girl who introduces herself as Lola. Lola and Judith begin talking, and Judith asks her a question that's been itching her mind. She's noticed that the maids are very cautious around Rudiger, and so she asks Lola if they fear him for some reason, worrying that Rudiger might be an abusive employer. Lola clarifies it quite easily, telling her that in fact, most maids try avoiding him because they fear he might fire them. Contrary to Judith's suspicions, the maids' fears are mostly based on rumors that got twisted with time, which started because many maids tried hitting him up to try to raise their status. Rudiger wouldn't take this, so each time a maid made a greedy approach at him, he would fire them. Glad her suspicions were wrong, Judith thanks Lola, who apparently knows so much about the castle's rumors because her mother is head of the kitchen, so she practically grew up there her whole life. We are then shown that Luca has started his lessons. Being that he never received any formal education, Judith not only expects, but also remembers from the novel that Luca had originally struggled a lot with the new influx of information. Even wicked Franz had used Luca's academic difficulties to try to shame him publicly. However, this time around, Luca is impressing all of his tutors. He seems to be a gifted child. Finally connecting the dots, Judith starts wondering why Luca seems to be so much more different in this version than in the original novel. Wondering if maybe he too is a transmigrator like herself. While Luca studies, Judith is sitting on a couch nearby knitting, or at least attempting to, and wondering if there could ever be a way of asking Luca if he's a transmigrator like herself. She can't think of any non-direct way, and concludes that maybe all of these differences have been caused by her own character's change of behavior once she possessed her body. Anyhow, Luca looks at Judith's knitting with a sort of pitiful look, and after she explains it's her first time trying it, he uninspiringly encourages her to keep it up if she likes it. Being the prideful woman she is, she can't stand Luca looking down on her knitting, and so she conscribes Lola to teach her knitting. After just a day, Judith finishes a cute scarf, which she intends to force Luca to wear. I just love their dynamic, guys. Next thing she knows, Sophia is calling up to see her. She gives Judith a luxurious and, well, excessively huge diamond necklace, as per the jewelry she had promised her. Astounded by the sheer size of it, Judith can't think of accepting it, let alone wearing it in public, as she knows it will draw too much attention to her, which will only mess up with her plans of living a heads-down life and avoiding the whole revenge plot. However, she knows from dealing with Rudiger that it's best not to argue with that side of the family, as they tend to be a bit thick-headed. And so, she humbly accepts the gift, though becomes quite burdened by its high value and responsibility. Later on that evening, Rudiger returned to the mansion bearing gifts for Judith. He notices that the Duchess has already given her a set of jewelry, which disappoints him as, in his words, he wanted to be the first to take care of her. Yeah! How cute! How hot! He then proceeds to give a blushing Judith a box with a small light violet pendant. He tells her he took so long in returning because of the rarity of the jewel, but he wanted to give it to her specially as it matches her eye colors. Suddenly, hundreds of servants bring in more and more jewelry boxes. Judith looks at Rudiger dumbfounded, as they have settled on just one jewelry piece. but he tells her he couldn't pick which one would look best on her. And so, he picked everything. At this point, just take it, girl. Rudiger then insists that he wants to put the lavender necklace on her. Going behind her and taking off his gloves, he slides the necklace around her neck and, well, tries for 6 minutes straight to clasp it until he manages to do it. He then insists on helping her put on a bracelet. She accepts, and that's when Rudiger sees the scar left on her wrist from the assassination attempt. He looks extremely guilty, telling Judith that if he had acted quicker, this wouldn't have happened. Judith tries to convince him it wasn't like that, and that it really is nothing. But it's no use. He goes on to claim he'll take full responsibility for what happened to her. A misunderstanding creating machine, is he not? After noticing Lola's shocked face at Rudiger's proclamation of responsibility, Judith notices the sort of misunderstanding Rudiger has just created. Frantically, she tries to clear it up to prevent any misleading rumors to spread, clarifying that Rudiger only meant responsibility for the assassin and not any other sort of responsibility. She wants Rudiger to leave, so as to prevent any more misunderstandings springing from his mouth. But she feels guilty for ushering him away after he gave her so many gifts. So she decides to gift him the muffler she just knitted for herself, being it the only thing she has of her own, and also imagining how cute Rudiger and Luca would look with matching scarves. Rudiger looks at it, completely speechless. Finally, with a charming look, he thanks her, telling her he is extremely happy. He may not believe in marriage, but boy, oh boy, is he harboring some strong feelings for Judith. Next day, Judith and Luca are looking at all the pieces Rudiger gifted her. Judith seems distressed as she needs to pick only one to keep, but even then she knows Rudiger will not take the remaining pieces back. Luca tells her to just keep them all and use them as an emergency fund in the future. Shocked, Judith gently scolds him, reminding him it's not nice to simply give away the gift someone gave you. And even so, she reminds him of the risks of greed and of wanting to keep too much for oneself. Luca accepts this, but as he is leaving for one of his lessons, he tells Judith to start to get used to this type of lifestyle, telling her she is now a Winterwald after all, and calling her mom. Judith got caught up in Luca's words, wondering if maybe he meant them as a warning, a sort of, we are in this scam together, don't back out on your own kind of warning. Lola then comes into Judith's room to offer her tea. While she is pouring, she blatantly asks her about her relationship with Rudiger. Assertive, I know. Judith tries to nonchalantly brush off any suspicions of any sort of romantic relationship. But even so, Lola keeps on insisting that the warm way Rudiger treats her raises some questions about his feelings towards her, even if they are one-sided. Judith is adamant, reminding Lola Rudiger is just acting out of duty, and given that she is Luca's mother, or at least that's what they're letting them believe, he is just treating her accordingly. Lola finally seems convinced and tells her she will help clear up all the rumors that have started spreading about the two of them. Later on, Judith is walking around the castle when she notices a group of maids gossiping in a corner about her. Completely disrespectfully, they are saying that Judith must be using her body to seduce Rudiger, and that's how she originally picked up Jonas way back then. You may imagine the blow Judith felt when hearing those things. Consternated with the rumors that she just heard, that she is trying to use Luca to leech her way into the dukedom and manipulate the Winterwalds, she decides to sit down with Rudiger and ask him for them to spend some time apart. Confused, Rudiger asks her why, but of course Judith is having a hard time explaining why it matters to her and what other people think, given that he's so stoic himself. She tries telling him that the kindness he has shown her is being misinterpreted by the maids, but Rudiger just asks her in return why she even cares what the maids think of her. Judith is at a loss. She tries to explain to him that it bothers her what others may think of her, but she knows it's futile. He doesn't seem to be able to understand that very concept. After much explaining, she thinks she might have actually been able to reach him. To her disappointment, of course he missed the point entirely, and instead of telling her that it's fine that she feels that it would be best that they spend some time apart, he ends up suggesting they fire every single maid and hire new ones. Of course, Judith is exasperated at Rudiger's thick-headedness. Runeger ends up telling Judith that they can either fire all the maids or keep on having the same type of relationship they've been having up until now. Absolutely defeated, Judith just accepts Runeger won't compromise at all, and she'll probably have to learn to live with the constant gossiping all around her. Later, as she is resting on a bench, she hears two maids approaching her go completely silent. She figures they must have been gossiping about her too. But to her surprise, they come up to her and thank her. Apparently, the steward told them that Lady Sophia had heard of the maids gossiping about her, and that she was determined to fire them. Allegedly, if it hadn't been for Judith's intervention and convincing Sophia not to do that, they would all be jobless by now. Utterly lost, Judith tells them that it's nothing, to which they reply by promising never to speak ill of her behind her back ever again. Judith then leaves and tries thinking on why the steward would bring up her name or lie like that, finally deciding it must have been all Runeger's doing. At least all the time she spent trying to reach him wasn't in vain, right? Finally, once Judith returns to her chamber, she finds Lola, who enthusiastically asks Judith if it's true that she saved both Luca and Runeger from the assassin back on the train. Shocked, Judith asks her where she heard that, and it seems an exaggerated version of the events that took place on the train has been spreading in rumors throughout the castle. After Judith clarifies to Lola what actually took place on the train with the assassin, Lola still finds her completely heroic and tells her that, at this point, it's no use trying to clarify that rumor, as it had already spread too much. Sometime later, Judith confronts Runeger about them, and of course, he was the one who started the rumors after all. I mean, in the end, no more maids are speaking ill of her behind her back, so that's a win. However, Judith points out to Runeger that the rumor got too out of hand, and that it would be best for no more rumors to be spread regarding her in the future. He agrees. After the whole rumor situation has been cleared up, Runeger seems to be trying to spend even more time with Judith than before. She notices this, and it's got her a bit confused. I mean, she knows it's supposed to mean nothing coming from him, but we can't blame her for thinking otherwise if the man is literally asking her to spend time with him 24/7, right? While they are having tea together, she suddenly asks him why he is taking so much care for her, expecting to finally see if she's just making all of it up in her head. Of course, Runeger replies with something relating to his duty and her being a noble woman and whatnot. Judith nods and is quite embarrassed by herself, as she believes she has convinced herself that she was special, when it was just, well, Runeger being Runeger. Poor Judith. She just keeps getting played on by this brick wall of a man. Later that night, after Runeger unknowingly shutting down any suspicions she may have had about his feelings for her, Judith starts crying in her bedroom. Runeger's words hurt her more than she expected them to. It seems she's just realized that she in fact had been growing feelings for him. Can't blame her, but poor thing knows that with Runeger's repulse towards any sort of relationship, her feelings are only one-sided. Next day during dinner, the Duke informs them that he believes it's finally time to formally introduce Luca's existence to the rest of the family. This came much earlier than in the original novel, but then again, with Luca's steep learning curve, it makes sense he is introduced earlier. Runeger opposes his father, telling him he believes it's a bit too early for that yet. However, the Duke is adamant. He can't stand their relatives gossiping about the empty position for the heir of the dukedom. Judith then asks if there's anything she can do to prepare. They tell her it would be best for her to know a bit about the members of the Winterwald family. Runeger then helps Judith learn the family tree. He starts by introducing the Duke's younger brother, Count Birkenlace, and his son, around the same age as Runeger, Franz. Runeger tells her he believes it was the Count who was behind the assassination attempt, even though Judith knows it was Franz. Wondering if maybe, like the other characters, Franz was a bit different from the novel, Judith asks Runeger about him. Runeger looks at her, kind of hurt, and tells her she shouldn't be curious about him. Okay? Judith insists, wanting to be prepared if she has to meet him during Luca's presentation. Coldly, and with a severe tone, Runeger tells her it's best for her not to approach Franz and never to speak with him. He tells her he doesn't respect boundaries and even goes as far as calling him stupid. Judith is just as surprised as we are to see Runeger talk so badly of someone. Runeger then continues teaching Judith about the Winterwald legacy and history. Apparently, they were originally an independent duchy up until 2,000 years ago when, during the war era, the Rumgart household unified the continent. They still keep an artifact from back when they were an independent duchy, a goblet which is said to grant people one wish in their lifetime. Judith is surprised at the mention of magic, but then she remembers it was a bit talked about during the novel. It seems the Duke is taking Luca to the ancestry room as they speak, which is the hidden room where they keep the goblet. Only the heirs of the dukedom can enter the ancestry room, meaning that not even Runegar has been there, nor knows where it is found. Just out of curiosity, Judith asks Runegar if he has a wish he would want to make. Runegar simply tells her he doesn't believe in any of that, which leaves Judith feeling a bit embarrassed. He then corrects himself, telling her that actually he has nothing left to wish for, as his wish has already been fulfilled. Judith doesn't dare to ask further. Damn it, girl! It's no time to be getting shy now! Much later, Luca finally returns. He seems to be exhausted, and so Judith tells him to sit next to her. She asks him if he went into the ancestry room, which startles him and leaves her wondering if maybe she wasn't supposed to know about it after all. Luca asks her how she knows about it, to which she tells him Runegar told her. This leaves Luca feeling even more gloomy than before. Seeing at how upset Luca is, Judith wants to know if she can help him in any way, or if something bad happened in that room. Luca just tells her he has a lot on his mind, to which Judith suggests that they think about them together. He just shuts down even more. Judith tries consoling him, telling him his worries mustn't be such a big of a deal and that they probably have a solution. Seeing as nothing is working, Judith tries the old and trusty method of diversion, asking him what he would wish for from the goblet once he becomes head of the house. He seems to be a bit intrigued, until Judith mentions that Runegar told her his wish had already been fulfilled, to which Luca responds by putting on a horrified look. Judith notices mentioning Runegar is making things worse. Luca asks Judith about what she would wish, and she tells him she wishes for him to be a happy adult, which leaves Luca blushing hard. How cute. Avoiding eye contact, he then rushes off to his next class. Finally, the day of Luca's introduction to the Winterwald family has arrived. Judith is all dressed up in a gorgeous dress and matching jewelry, picked by Runegar, while Luca looks like the cutest little prince. Luca goes to look for Judith. After looking at her, he smiles and tells her she looks pretty. How absolutely heart-meltingly adorable, OMG! Runegar then appears, looking like an actual prince. He takes a long look at Judith and tells her she looks extremely beautiful. Kya! Runegar takes her hand firmly and they start approaching the main hall. As they are going there, Runegar notices that Judith is wearing the necklace he picked for her. We all know why she picked that to wear. Duh. But well, Judith can only tell him it's because it was the one that matched the dress best of all. Judith then confesses that she is a bit nervous, as she fears she'll make a mistake in front of all of the aristocrats. After a long walk, they finally enter the banquet hall, where hundreds of heads turn to look at the new heir, Luca, and his supposed mother, Judith, with judgy eyes. Judith introduces herself and Luca as her son when a tide of whispering takes over the hall. Suddenly, an old lady looks at her and asks her about her last name and her hometown. When she tells her she is a Maybom and that she is from a village in the south named Emdem, an uproar of comments regarding her status as a commoner rises. They're even questioning her presence at the banquet. Judith's only worry is Luca and how he is feeling, so she takes his hand strongly in hers. Everything halts when Runegar steps in, when he directly attacks his aunt, the old lady who originally made the remark to Judith, reminding her of her serious monetary issues. Everyone is shocked at Runegar, even telling him that they were speaking ill of Judith on his behalf. They continue by telling him not to speak like that to his elder, but he's had enough. He sternly reminds them whose estate they're stepping on and not to speak ill of a Winterwald so lightly. That's when Franz appears, condescendingly clapping and telling Runegar to not be so harsh on their aunt. Finally, the Duke and Duchess walk in. That's when the Duke introduces Luca as the heir of the Winterwald estate to everyone present, and Luca greets them all himself. Luca is sharp, telling everyone off for speaking badly of his mother in front of him, the next heir of the Winterwald estate. However, people start talking back to him as well, telling him he shouldn't speak so highly before even having a fixed position. That's when the Duke steps in, putting everyone in line and reminding them Luca is to be the heir of the estate, so they better treat him with the respect he deserves. He even scolds Franz personally, being that he had uttered something about Luca not being a Winterwald since birth. But the Duke reminds him he is son of Jonas, and even points out that Franz wasn't a Winterwald from birth. Franz isn't done yet, asking the Duke when he plans on introducing Luca into the family tree and introducing him to the royal family. To Luca's surprise, the Duke tells him that he was planning on changing Luca's surname to Winterwald right after the banquet. Later on, some women are talking to Judith, asking her in a condescending way about her commoner life before going to Winterwald. Judith notices the Duchess is leaving. She doesn't seem to be feeling so well, and so she takes advantage of that to leave as well. She uses Luca as an excuse, telling the women Luca is tired and that she'll take him to bed. The women question even this, telling her that in nobility, a nanny does that, and even go as far as mocking the Duchess for having nursed Jonas herself. Judith has really had enough, telling them to go talk to the Duchess themselves if they have any more suggestions like that. And just like that, she turns around and leaves with Luca and Runeger. We love a girl who can stand up for herself. Rudiger escorts Judith to her bedroom door. Once there, he asks her why she just let those people talk to her like that, to which Judith makes him notice that it's quite amazing how he now seems to be concerned with what other people are thinking. This surprises Runeger as well, as he just realized that he is in fact bothered by what other people think when it concerns Judith, and only Judith. Yeah, he literally said that. Judith, of course, blushes hard. Rudiger then tells her goodnight and leaves, leaving a quite troubled Judith behind, wondering if he actually likes her or not. After a night of tossing and turning, she settles on keeping her feelings hidden, so as to at least be able to be by Runeger's side as Luca's guardian. The next day, Luca is adamant that Judith doesn't meet Franz, let alone speak to him. Judith agrees, but she's still thinking it would be best to meet with him to see what he is up to now that all the guests are staying over at the mansion. Lola appears then and tells Judith the Duchess wants to share a meal with her, and as she hates crowded places, it would just be them two alone. Judith is delighted at the offer and swiftly leaves Luca to go meet the Duchess. While going to meet the Duchess, she coincidentally walks into Franz. He tries to invite her for a cup of tea, but she tells him she has plans with Sophia already. He remarks Sophia must cherish her quite a bit to be showing her so much attention. In any case, he insists that they have tea together the next day, to which Judith agrees. Don't worry though, our heroine is no fool and is ready for Franz's wolf in sheep's clothing tactic. Judith has a nightmare with the moment in the novels in which Franz kills her character, as in the original novel, he had used her to get closer to the title, but after she turned out to be useless, he just murdered her. Tea time with Franz comes along, and our girl is prepared. He starts by asking her questions about her life in the castle and her relationship with Runeger, noticing how she addresses him by first-name basis. She apologizes and blames her commoner roots and lack of education for that, telling him that nothing is going on between them and that Runeger is only acting with a sense of responsibility for Luca's sake. Judith then asks Franz about his own marital status, and he tells her he is not even courting anyone, as he puts it, because he hasn't found the one yet. Judith really doubts this, thinking maybe he hasn't advanced on any romantic relationships because he is waiting to see if he can get the dukedom, which requires him to marry into the royal family. As Franz keeps asking about Runeger, Judith breaks down crying, of course, an act to entice Franz, while going on about how she doesn't feel accepted by their relatives yet. All of a sudden, Franz stands up and apologizes to Judith. He then proceeds to get down on one knee beside her and confess his feelings towards her, finishing up by asking her to start going out with him. What the hell? Judith is just as shocked as we are, even more so when Franz brings up marriage. Judith then thinks about what Franz's intentions may be, finally realizing that most probably he wants to marry her so as to be able to manipulate her and Luca more closely. And then, in 15 years, when the railway building concession expires, he'll probably just try to get rid of Luca to get the dukedom himself. Horrified at her suspicions, she severely tells Franz that his proposal is really bothersome, and that there's no way that's gonna happen. However, the little leech is insistent. He asks her if she doesn't find him attractive, and that he could provide her a safe shoulder to lean on. To which Judith reminds him that she already has Rudiger. Franz goes on to talk bad of Rudiger, calling him cold and telling her she shouldn't trust him. As if. In a desperate attempt, Franz even goes as far as grabbing her by the wrist. Judith implores him to let go of her, but he won't budge, demanding her to give him a chance. That's when, thank God, Rudiger enters the room, and with one hot and swift move, he swings a fire iron at Franz's hand to get him to release Judith. With the hottest look ever, he then orders Franz never to get close to Judith again, and to not even dream of trying to use her for his own twisted plans. Rudiger body blocks Judith from Franz. He questions Franz about his intentions, asking him if his father, Rudiger's uncle, ordered him to do this. Franz keeps on insisting he actually fell for Judith, even saying that the reason Rudiger is so worked up is because his own heart is on the line. Rudiger looks at him with a quizzed look, but luckily, Franz ends up leaving, not before telling Judith that his offer still stands if she changes her mind. Rudiger and Judith sit down at the tea table, and Lola breaks down crying at Judith's lap, asking her to forgive her for not calling Rudiger earlier, who had in fact asked her to call him if Franz ever tried to interact with Judith. Cute, but invasive, Rudiger. Judith wonders if maybe Lola is afraid Rudiger might fire her for going against his orders and not calling him before the tea happened, and so she tells Rudiger not to fire her. This calms Lola down. Then a sort of interrogation by Rudiger to Judith takes place. He asks her what Franz's proposal was to her, to which she tells him the dating and even the marriage proposal. He then asks her what she responded to, and looks quite relieved when she tells him she turned down both of them. When Judith thought it was all over, Rudiger fires one final question at her, asking her if she said no because it was Franz who had proposed, or if she was opposed to marriage in general. Judith is at a loss at this question. She sarcastically asks Rudiger if he intends to arrange a marriage for her, as he had said before they came to the castle. But of course, Rudiger doesn't understand the sarcasm and takes it seriously. Exasperated, Judith tells him it wasn't serious, and tells him that no, she is not interested in getting married, which, surprisingly, leaves Rudiger with a sort of disappointed look. After that's over, Judith meets angry Luca, who immediately scolds her for going behind his back and ignoring his words and meeting up with Franz. He even yells at her in anger, telling her never to meet with Franz again. Judith finally is able to calm him down, and things move on. After all of that, Franz finally left the castle, leaving Judith a bit more relieved. Later on, one of Luca's tutors wants to meet up with Judith. In the meeting, she expresses concern for Luca as he has been skipping class, and when he attends them, he is usually absent-minded. He still answers all of the questions correctly, but it is worrisome behavior nonetheless. Judith agrees and thanks her, then calling up Luca to talk about this. When questioning him about this, Luca tells her he doesn't intend on going on any more classes, that he will study on his own as he already has a lot on his mind and the classes are only taking up his time. Judith presses Luca to tell her about what's that's weighing so heavily on him, but he still won't talk. And so, she resolves to tell him to go out for air with her. They go outside and Judith hands Luca a glove and a ball. She tells him that when he is feeling overwhelmed like that, he should go out and move his body a bit. And so, she teaches him to play catch. Let's not forget that in the real world, Judith used to be a softball competitor in middle school, and so she knows a lot and is pretty good at it actually. Luca, however, doesn't seem to have that much of a sports side to him. Rudiger appears and asks if he can play too, so Luca, who is already exhausted, hands over his gloves so that Rudiger plays with Judith. Rudiger also never played catch before, yet he seems to be a natural. Rudiger, noticing Judith's ability, tells her it made sense now how accurate her throwing of the pepper shaker had been at the assassin. However, Luca didn't know that had happened, and Judith doesn't want him knowing she was involved in a man's death. She then ushers Runegar away and tries diverting Luca's attention, who is now asking questions about the incident. The chapter begins with Judith visiting Sophia's bedside. Apparently, her health has worsened and now she is bedridden. Sophia tells Judith she should get ready to go visit the capital and formally introduce Luca to the royal family. It would be a sort of debut for her as well, so a female chaperone is expected to go with her. However, she can't go herself due to her health condition, so she instead asks Princess Melina, Vanessa's younger sister, to chaperone her. Judith feels it's too much, a princess chaperoning for her? However, Sophia seems stern on the decision, reminding her that she is no longer just a commoner, but the mother of the heir of the Winterwald estate. And so, the preparations start to go to the capital. Lola seems to be the most excited of all, as she will be accompanying them as Judith's maid. Judith is more than anything preparing to meet for the first time Isabella Enderson, a character that appeared in the books once when they went to the capital. She is sort of a villain. In the original novel, she was Franz's lover and mother of their child. However, she insisted the child was Jonas's, and as proof of their relationship, she gave them a hand watch that she claims Jonas gave her, which belonged to Princess Vanessa. Of course, Sophia took them in, even though her son never took Luca's place, as Runegar was successful in protecting him. Nonetheless, she worked with Franz by giving him info about Winterwald's internal affairs. And so, now that Judith is in the picture, she wants to prevent any of this from happening. 2 months passed, and it's finally time to leave the Winterwald estate, to head down to the capital. Before leaving, Judith approaches Sophia to say goodbye, and Sophia, in turn, sweetly grabs both her hands and wishes her a good trip. This warms Judith's heart, and she gets even more emotional as everyone else of the Winterwald estate wishes them a nice trip as they go into the carriage. She notices how she subconsciously made a home of the Winterwald place and its people, and is a bit teary while leaving for the capital, gaining strange looks from Luca. They arrive at the train station and board the train that'll take them to the capital. Runegar tells them a bit about the royal family, starting with the previous king, who's still alive but too old to continue ruling, who would be Luca's great-grandfather. Runegar tells them he's a bad-tempered cold man who only ever expressed warmth towards Princess Vanessa, one of his daughters, but not so much towards his other children, Princess Melina and the current king. He also didn't like Jonas very much, so nothing will guarantee he'll like Luca. Runegar also tells him that the Princess Melina, Vanessa's sister and Judith's chaperone for her visit to the capital, had a close relationship with Vanessa. This preoccupies Judith a bit, thinking that she might dislike Sophia for seemingly taking Vanessa's place after she died. So for Sophia's sake, Judith is determined to be very careful when reaching the capital and not make any mistakes which may prejudice Sophia. It's a week-long train ride from Winterwald to the capital, and Judith is getting quite bored. She glances over to Luca, who's always with a concerned and pensive expression on his face. Way too serious for a 10-year-old to have. Determined to change that, Judith proposes they play a game, showing Luca she's bought playing cards. She hands them to Luca and is marveled at his shuffling skills as well as his knowledge on cards, telling her there's a card named after her, the Queen of Hearts. She worries he might have picked up those skills from gangsters at Emden. Judith invites Runegar to play with them as well, and he warns them he's not a very good player, but he's made bets with his army buddies before. And thus, the games begin. They start playing a simple game called Old Maid, and soon enough, Luca is winning every round while Runegar is losing every round. Both Luca and Judith are surprised at his lack of skills, and Judith worries his army buddies have been abusing his bad skills to take money off him while betting. At the same time, though, Runegar doesn't seem too vexed about losing, suggesting he's just playing for the fun of it or as a social thing. They change to poker, and the results continue the same. Then, with a bored expression, Luca suggests they play while betting. Judith gets really mad at Luca, scolding him for wanting to gamble. Luca, though, corrects her and ends up convincing her by telling her gambling and betting are not the same, and that betting is a gentleman's skill. He convinces her by telling her that betting is based on analysis and thought, while gambling is just on sheer luck. So, he tells them that from now on, the winner will get to ask the loser a question that they may either answer or pay money to avoid. Judith protests, telling him she doesn't have any money, so Luca just tells her she must answer the questions she's asked. And so they play. Rudiger continues losing while Luca continues winning, and so he asked Rudiger a set of interesting questions. First, he asks him what his ideal type of woman is, but at his inability to answer clearly, he ends up paying. Then, he asks him if he's currently interested in someone, but Rudiger just blushes and chooses to pay instead. Gotta love Luca. He really is a team player. Rudiger's response really set off an alarm in Judith's head, who is now wondering whether he's in love with someone who passed away or if he's experiencing an unrequited love with a married woman or whatnot. Gosh, when is she gonna stop being so clueless? This distracted her, and now she's lost this round. She gets prepared for Luca's question, fearing her feelings for Rudiger will be exposed, but is shocked to hear Luca ask her if she'd be mad if he didn't take on the Winterwald duchy. Judith is speechless. She doesn't understand why this question all of a sudden. So Luca adds that he wonders if she'd be mad if he didn't take on the duchy, as she'd told him before that she wanted to live a life of luxury. Heartbroken, Judith realizes she's been burdening Luca all along with her nonchalant words, noticing how she's left him to deal with the anxiety and burden of being thrown into a new life with new responsibilities, at just 10 years old all by himself. And so, she decides to express herself clearly for Luca to not be anxious anymore, telling him she never came to Winterwald trying to benefit off of him, but rather to protect him, and letting him know that if he ever wants to leave, she will gladly take his hand and go with him, making Luca tear up. She then adds, in any case, she has been planning to leave Winterwald when Luca becomes Dutch, causing both Rudiger and Luca to stand up in utter shock. She tries to explain herself, telling him that she thought Luca wouldn't need her protection anymore, so she doesn't want to bother. But neither of the boys are listening. They mutter to themselves, but tell Judith nothing. After that, Judith starts to put the cards away, but Rudiger stops her, telling her there's a question he wants to ask her. And so, they continue playing, and Rudiger continues losing money as he's always the loser. Rudiger continues losing, almost running out of pocket money, but he continues playing with a fierce look in his eyes, determined to ask Judith that question. However, Judith doesn't like where this is going and hates to see Luca with such a greedy and arrogant attitude, calling Rudiger uncle for the first time in a sly manner while thanking him for all the money he took. So she finally stops the game. Judith tells Rudiger that whatever he's curious about, he can just ask her, but he protests, telling her it would be pathetic to find out like that. While Luca also complains, telling Judith he's been winning for a reason. However, Judith tells Rudiger she doesn't want him to become addicted to gambling as her father, Luca's grandfather, had lost everything they owned because of his gambling problems. Now saddened, Rudiger decides to stop as well. Night comes along and Luca goes to sleep looking like a baby angel. Judith and Rudiger meet and start talking, with Judith apologizing for Luca's behavior, but Rudiger honestly doesn't feel offended or hurt by anything. He asks her if she's tired from the trip and smiles when he hears her say that it's fun to be traveling all together. 3 days later, they finally arrive at the capital of the rum cart kingdom, Bluyen. In the carriage that's taking them to the Winterwald townhouse in the suburbs of Bluyen, Judith marvels at the likelihood between Rudiger and Luca. They arrive, and Rudiger escorts Judith out of the carriage, grabbing her hand like a gentleman. But when Judith doesn't need his support anymore and tries to take her hand from his, she notices him squeezing her hand in place. Rudiger, control yourself. She doesn't want the maids to misunderstand their relationship, but Rudiger won't let go of her hand until Luca gets off the carriage and sharply asks Rudiger if he's escorting her or flirting with her, gaining Judith's horrified scolding. They show Judith to her room for their stay, and she's amazed as it looks like it had been made for royalty. Rudiger tells her it used to be Vanessa's, and she's the first woman Sophia allows to stay there since Vanessa passed. She's overwhelmed to be allowed there, fearing she might spill some tea or do something that might ruin it. At the same time, Judith's quite amazed at how fast Lola seems to be adapting to the new household and blending in with the maids there. But Lola tells her the other maids are treating her so well because they all think Judith will become the next lady of the Winterwald house. Judith is surprised by Lola's words. She asks her what makes everyone think that, and Lola tells her it's mainly because she's been allowed to stay at the Iris room, Vanessa's prior room, which shows everyone that Lady Sophia supports her. Apparently, that room is famous in high society, and so Judith now wonders if her staying there has been a political decision all along, so she decides to take action regarding Isabella. Judith calls for Wilhelm, the head butler of the townhouse, and asks if it's possible for him to hand her the monthly reports the townhouse sent Winterwald 11 years ago. They register the movement of everyone in the townhouse, and during that time, Jonas had spent a lot of time in the capital, so Judith hopes to find evidence in Jonas's movements from 11 years ago, around the time Isabella's illegitimate child had been conceived, that the child is not his. Of course, Judith doesn't tell Wilhelm this, but he's quite perceptive, asking her if there's anything in particular she's looking for so that he can filter out useless reports. She then asks him to also keep an eye out for a lady named Isabella Enderson, and if he could omit telling this to Runeger for the time being. Wilhelm accepts, but tells her that obviously if Runeger asks him anything directly, he'll have to answer. And thus, Judith's plan to dismantle Isabella is set in motion. It's time for Judith to meet her chaperone, Princess Melina, and so she gets ready to head to the Imperial Palace. Runeger goes with her as he also has affairs in the palace, though we all know he would have accompanied her even if he didn't. Before leaving, Luca appears to say goodbye, telling Judith to behave and not cause any trouble, and she replies that it should be him who has to behave and study for his tests, even though Luca appears to be way beyond all that. Lola then assures Luca that she'll look after Judith, and if anyone strange appears, she'll get them away from her, finally convincing Luca and gaining protests from Judith. I honestly love their dynamic. Runeger and Judith reach the palace, and Runeger leaves her, telling her they'll meet after her meeting is over. She enters the room Melina is waiting in and finds her sipping tea with a hardened look on her face. Melina immediately tells her to sit, but before Judith can even do that, she tells her she's not satisfied with this situation, making Judith flinch. She explains that it's beneath her to chaperone for her, as she wasn't even Jonas's concubine, but rather just a one-night stand. However, Sophia gifted her a really rare necklace, so it was hard for her to refuse. She planned to return the necklace to Judith and find her another chaperone, and Judith, though shocked and uncomfortable, was about to thank her for going through the trouble when Melina cuts her off, telling her she changed her mind and she'll chaperone her after all. Judith asks Melina why she changed her mind, and she tells her just on a whim, but then adds that she understands why Sophia wants her to chaperone her, making Judith suspect that, just like Sophia, Melina might be seeing Vanessa through her. Melina then asks if Sophia treats her well, and Judith tells her she does, gaining a smile from Melina and making Judith realize Melina doesn't hate Sophia as she had expected, but rather her feelings towards her are more complicated. Melina then tells Judith not to trust the Duke, Winterwald, reminding her when Franz warned her about Runeger. She sends the maids out of the room and confides in her that she suspects he may be responsible for Vanessa's death. Apparently, Vanessa's plan had been to be with the Duke, give him a child that would benefit him from the railway contract, and then divorce him, returning to the Imperial Palace. Judith asks what Vanessa was to gain from this, but Melina is still unsure. Moreover, Melina tells her that the Duke had in fact been trying to get to Sophia, whom he'd fancied even before marrying Vanessa, and that the railway had been an excuse to make this happen and get close to Sophia. Melina also tells her to be cautious of Winterwald, as she suspects Jonas was really murdered, as he hated horse riding, so him dying in an accident of that nature is really sus to her. She tells her that the Duke never liked him, and that he might prefer Runeger to be his heir, as he's the son of Sophia, who he loves. Judith is in shock, now fearing for Luca's safety in the Winterwald manor. Judith literally staggers out of the room, where Lola is waiting for her, concerned at seeing the shape she came out in. She tells her she should have stayed with her, even saying she would have defended her against the princess, making Judith smile. Lola suggests they go to the gardens to blow off some steam, as it would be a while until Runeger was free to meet them again. They go, and Lola is fascinated by the flowers, and so Judith tells her to go take a look around while she thinks alone. Excitedly, Lola leaves to look through the garden. That's when Judith finally breaks down, trying to process all the information Melina spilled on her. She doubts the Duke will go so far to make Runeger his successor, as he's always shown himself to be quite uninterested in him, and so she decides to focus her affairs with Isabella while in the capital. Suddenly, she hears an old man struggling to breathe, so she hurries to help him up, and as soon as he sees her, his eyes widen in bewilderment. Judith takes him over to a bench, and he insists on talking with her, asking about her family and if she's married. Even though he has sudden bursts of anger, she tells him her family is small, she's not married and from Emden, and she's being helped financially by the Winterwalds, which seems to strike a nerve in him. Lola then starts shouting after her, so she parts ways with the old man. Lola starts scolding Judith, telling her she was worried when she didn't come at her calling, and then scolded her some more when Judith told her she had been helping a strange but kind old man, making Lola worried she might have put herself in danger by meeting strange men. They leave the gardens and find Rudiger socializing with 2 other men. Judith doesn't want to interrupt them, but the second Rudiger notices her there, he hastily trunks around, cutting the conversation with the other men cold, and asks her if they should leave now. One of the men introduces himself to Judith as Major Peter Gremlin, grabbing her hand, but in a millisecond, Rudiger takes him by the collar and gets him away from her with a deadly glare, asking Judith if she's all right. She's a bit surprised by this, but then remembers the first time she met Rudiger, she wouldn't let him take her hand to escort her, so she realizes that he may think it's something she hates. She clarifies it's a no big deal, disheartening him. The other man, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Hepsburn, tells her they went to corroborate the rumors that Rudiger had escorted a lady to the Imperial Palace, as there's a bet going around their military buddies about when that would happen. Apparently, Rudiger never escorted anyone before, as he never treated ladies any different from men. This makes Judith remember the conversation she'd had with Rudiger, in which she thought she meant nothing to him and broke her heart, now realizing that may not be the case. Judith keeps on asking Rudiger's army buddies about their statements, not believing at first that he never treated any lady special before, but they tell her that's true. She's decided to have no expectations about Rudiger's feelings, but is now starting to question that. Meanwhile, Rudiger is quiet and just lets his buddies talk without saying a word. Suddenly, he grabs Judith's hand and ushers her away just as Peter was talking about the princess and how she'd talk about promoting him to minister, saying she's been working for nothing. Lola then leaves Rudiger and Judith alone for a moment as she goes to call the carriage, and Judith apologizes to Rudiger for having elongated the conversation so much. He tells her she doesn't need to, as he'd hoped his buddies would make it clear to her that she is, in fact, special to him. The feels. He tells her he's thought he'd worked hard to express himself so far, but it didn't seem to be transmitting correctly to Judith. She's getting quite flustered, not understanding the meaning of his words, and reminding him of when he told her he treated her well because he was a noble gentleman and she was a lady. But he clarifies to her now that he meant that she's a lady special to him. Judith asks him if he likes her, and he tells her he does. Finally. Still unsure though, she clarifies she means as a woman, and he still nods. Aww! She imagines a future in which she's together with him, both raising Luca, but then remembers dismayed that to the rest of society, she's his sister-in-law. She's completely upset at her realization. Seeing as how she's already introduced herself as Luca's mom, it would be too late for her to take it back and tell everyone she's in fact his aunt. Not to mention that it will probably cause her arrest for having deceived the royal family. She expresses her concern to Rudiger, who of course doesn't seem to find any problem in becoming partners, even if to the rest of the world they're supposed to be siblings-in-law. She then asks him about his thoughts on marriage, and is really surprised to hear him say that he would prefer to marry if he could. In shock, she asks him if it wasn't true that he wasn't interested in marriage, and even more shocked, Rudiger asks her where she got that idea from, making her come to the realization that she had based this assumption off of rumors all along. She also asks him what he meant when, back then, he told her about getting her married in Winterwald, and confidently, he tells her he always thought of himself as an option for her. Gosh, the lack of communication between the two thus far is astounding. Well, in any case, Rudiger tells her he'll await her response to his confession, but seeing as she has to get ready for Luca's debut to royalty and wants to be alert for the whole Isabella situation, she tells him she'll reply once they return to Winterwald. Finally, she asks him about the promotion to minister his buddy said the king had offered him. Rudiger tells her he declined it, as the price for it would be marrying the current king's second daughter. Judith had actually read about that in the gossip newspaper she'd taken from Luca on their train ride to Winterwald, which said that Rudiger and the second princess have a close relationship from the time he served as a soldier in the capital. This makes Judith feel uneasy, as she's realizing that the second princess might also have an eye for Rudiger. Rudiger tells her he doesn't understand the reasoning behind the king's proposal, as originally, he thought he wanted to make this arrangement in case Runegar became the next heir of the duchy because of the railroad contracts. But now with Luca in the picture, Runegar doesn't understand why the king's still trying to pair him with his second daughter. Runegar then asks Judith if there's a specific type of man or characteristic she finds desirable in a man, leaving her speechless. Confidently, he tells her he knows he'll be able to match her expectations to a certain extent, but she reassures him that he's pretty much covered them all already. However, she thinks that maybe she'd like it if he was nicer to people, but at the same time, she doesn't want him to be, as it's pretty much the only thing that's keeping the ladies away from him. Girl, you gotta get a handle on that jealousy. In any case, she tells him he mustn't cheat nor gamble. She then asks him if he'd already told Lieutenant Hepsburg that he was going to escort her, as he ended up winning the jackpot from the bet amongst his army buddies. He tells her he did, in exchange for splitting the jackpot with him. He asks her if she's upset by it, and is surprised to hear her tell him she'll forget it if he splits his winnings with her. She's no fool, this Judith. Judith figured that since winning the bet wouldn't have happened without her, at least some of the wins should go to her, and honestly, as she's got no way of making money for herself regularly, she's kinda desperate to get some. Runegar agrees, telling her he'll give her all his share. They return to the townhouse where Luca is waiting for them. He notices a change in the atmosphere between them, but decides to leave it be. He then asks Judith what it is she had Wilhelm prepare for her, and she's dismayed at seeing Luca find out about the task she gave Wilhelm, even though she asked him to be discreet about them. She brushes it off to Luca and Runegar as just trying to prepare for Luca's coming out banquet, but they don't seem so convinced. She then goes to confront Wilhelm about Luca finding out, but he tells her he was extremely discreet and that the report never left his hands, so there's no way Luca read it. Judith suspects that Luca found a way around some secret passages in the mansion. In any case, Wilhelm gives Judith both the old reports on Jonas's movements and the information he gathered on Isabella. Judith starts going through Jonas's reports late at night in her room and sees there's no time in which he ever met Isabella, having in her hands the proof needed to discredit her when she appears in the scene. Judith is now determined to use this information to change the genre of the original novel, not wanting Luca to live for revenge and wanting to prevent Rudiger's death. It's already the day of Luca's banquet, and all preparations are in place. Judith is elegantly dressed and is wearing the fairy tears necklace gifted to her by Sophia, as Lola tells her she has to shine the brightest there, in support of Luca. She meets Luca and Runegar in the main hall of the townhouse, and Luca gives her his hand and tells her he'll escort her that evening, given that Runegar lost a bet with him. Again. Gosh, man, just give up on the betting. They arrive at the royal palace and are led to a drawing room and wait for Princess Melina, who's still getting ready. However, a maid tells Judith to follow her to Melina's chambers. Once there, she greets her and notices the second princess, Josephine Rumcart, standing behind her. They are introduced to each other, and Melina sends them off to wait in the drawing room while she gets ready. During their walk there, the atmosphere between is really tense, as the princess is full-on ignoring her existence. Once they arrive, Josephine's face suddenly brightens, and she starts lively talking to Runegar. She also greets Luca, telling him to relax around her, as he's her nephew after all, telling him she'll treat him like family and expects the same in return. She then tells him she'll introduce him to the youngest princess, Princess Charlotte, who's around his age. She continues talking with Runegar, purposefully ignoring Judith's existence and leaving her out of the conversation. Oh god, I already hate her. Josephine is asking Runegar why he turned away her father's, the king's, request for him to be her escort at her debutante ball, and Runegar tells her he doesn't think it's okay for him to meddle like that. She then talks about the king having him in mind as her future husband, which pisses Judith even further. However, she then starts talking about the first princess, Princess Victoria, who also has Runegar in mind as a future husband, for she is looking for a man who can help her gain the throne. So she thinks Runegar might be able to get her Winterwald's support. She even starts talking about her sister's suspicions that Runegar killed Jonas to inherit the duchy, but that she isn't as convinced now that Luca is in the picture. Judith is horrified she's talking about that in front of Luca. Melina is finally ready, so they head to the main banquet hall, and while going there, Luca cutely grabs Judith's hand and reassures her that nothing is going on between Runegar and Josephine. he's the cutest. Once inside, a lot of chatter roars up regarding Judith, and noticing her necklace, people believe she'll be holding great status in the future, so they want to get near her. She stumbles into Runeger's army buddy she met before. They start talking, telling her they're sorry Runeger is escorting Jonas's lady instead of her, and offering to escort her if she's alone. That's when they notice Luca, and she introduces herself as his mother. Shocked and recognizing Luca's resemblance to Jonas, they ask her if she used to be with him, and to their astonishment, she tells them that's right. Runeger's friends are quite horrified at this news, as they thought Judith was Runeger's lover and not the woman staying at the Iris Room, supposedly Jonas's previous lover. Runeger appears, and Peter grabs him, furious, wanting to ask him about the situation. Peter asks him if he's in love with Judith, and Runeger gives such a vague answer that makes Peter understand he is, in fact, in love with her. So he's now trying to explain to him that it's really wrong for him to pursue a relationship with her, as she used to be Jonas's lover. The king makes his entrance and calls Luca forward. Judith seems to be more nervous than Luca as he approaches the king. Once before him, the king warmly greets him and publicly acknowledges him as his grandnephew, accepting him as part of the royal family. The party resumes, and in a more relaxed way, the king approaches Judith to greet her. He seems really kind, and even asks Luca if he'd like to go more often to the royal palace to befriend his youngest, Charlotte. The king and Josephine then start talking about Runeger and his reluctance to accept her, of course, making Judith extremely uncomfortable in this situation. That's when Princess Victoria appears. Victoria is insisting that the king shouldn't meddle in Josephine's love life anymore, saying she's an adult and she can take care of it herself. However, the king is adamant that it's his duty as her father to look for a spouse for her, as she doesn't show interest in doing it herself and would rather continue living by his side. Josephine tries to push Runeger onto Victoria, but she tells him he's off the list as she wants someone who won't argue with her. Instead, Victoria starts talking to Judith, telling her that Runeger most certainly would be a good spouse for her, absolutely horrifying her and everyone present. The king protests, telling Victoria Runeger can't be with Judith, as she used to be Jonas's lady, but with that same argument, Victoria tells him that Josephine also shouldn't be with Runeger as they're like cousins. In the meantime, Judith is completely dumbfounded at the situation she's witnessing. Then noticing Runeger and Victoria share a conspicuous look, as if they'd made a deal or something, infuriating her. Just as the king's about to leave, he hears a woman yelling. He goes to her, demanding to know who she is and how dare she spoil a royal ball. And she introduces herself as Isabella Anderson, crying about how unfair it is for Luca to be getting this ball while her son doesn't get anything, then publicly claiming her son is also Jonas's child. There's an uproar in the banquet, but the king silences everyone and asks Isabella for evidence that her child is also Jonas's. She hastily hands him the pocket watch which belonged to Vanessa, claiming Jonas gave it to her. Everyone is astounded, starting to believe her claims. However, Judith steps in, asking permission from the king to speak. He grants it, and she, in a very clever and polite manner, starts unweaving Isabella's claims. She asks him when her son was born, and Isabella says in spring. Isabella thinks that Judith is trying to argue that because Luca was born months earlier that he is more deserving of the duchy. But she surprises everyone by instead telling her she's actually just doubting that Isabella's claims are true. With poise, Judith tells everyone that there are no records of Jonas ever encountering her, even asking her if she eventually showed up after her son was born to the townhouse, asking to see Jonas. Isabella says she did, in autumn, and that she was cast away by the gatekeepers, even after showing Vanessa's watch. Judith rebuttals that there are no records of her even going to the gatekeepers, which would have been noted if she had indeed showed them the watch. Runeger also gets involved by saying the gatekeepers ignored the watch. Isabella is basically saying they are incompetent, thus bad-mouthing the Winterwald establishment. Public opinion quickly changed against Isabella. Now cornered, Isabella is claiming she lied about going to the townhouse, but rather she went directly to Jonas, who brushed her off and told her to sell Vanessa's pocket watch to pay for an abortion, but she couldn't bring herself to do so. Isabella tries to play the victim card still, crying and trying to make Judith appear as the villain for wanting to get rid of her. But Judith continues saying that it's not even true Isabella ever met Jonas. Judith tells everyone that Jonas wouldn't have let her keep the watch, as even though he never valued Vanessa much, he did value his status given by his royal bloodline, so he wouldn't have let her keep a royal heirloom just like that. Jonas's attitude is further corroborated by his past lover, who made up about 30% of the guests of the banquet. So Judith finishes off by saying that if Isabella thinks he'd let her sell the watch just like that, it's because she never even met him. Luca intercedes as well, saying that Sophia had told him that the watch had been stolen long ago, now making Melina step in, saying that if Sophia said so, then it must be true. Judith is a bit worried Luca might be lying, as she never read anything like that in the original novel. But in any case, she decides to deal with it later. The room is in clamor, shouting at Isabella for having lied to them, leaving her trembling and speechless. Judith is about to administer the final blow, wanting to ask her who gave her the watch to expose Franz. But before she can finish the job, another man steps in, claiming to be a close friend of Jonas, and tells everyone that Judith is a liar too, asking the king for permission to expose her. Lloyd Royton Greenhalghton tells everyone that, as Emden is part of his family's fiefdom, as soon as rumors about Judith started to spread at the capital, he sent people over there to investigate her. There, locals told them that she wasn't Luca's mom, but rather his aunt, and it had been her older sister who birthed him, and that she abused Luca and only passed as his mother to take advantage of his new status. Luca steps in, defending Judith. However, Greenhalghton asks for a witness to step forward, and none other than Potato Head appears. He seems to have been forced into that situation, and Greenhalghton asks him if it's true Judith's not Luca's mom, and if she abused him, and he agrees. The whole room is in clamor again, scorning Judith for having devised such a lie. She sees Franz grinning and mouthing to her that if she accepts his marriage proposal, he'll call the whole thing off. She's enraged. She'll not allow herself to be used by that prick, and so she decides to come forward with the truth, preferring to be imprisoned for deceiving the royal family than having to go along with Franz. So, she confesses she's Luca's aunt, and tells everyone she lied so that she could be able to protect Luca more closely when he came to Winterwald. Greenhalghton then continues to badmouth her, saying she also deceived the colonel and she's a woman of loose morals. Runegar won't stand this anymore and challenges Greenhalghton to a duel. Greenhalghton is dismayed. Of course, he knows that a duel with Runegar is a death sentence, and thus he kneels before the king, begging him to call off the duel as he was only stating facts. He can't just refuse the duel, as it would tarnish his honor, but in my opinion, this scene he's mounting is way worse. That's when the grumpy grandpa Judith met enters the ballroom and everyone bows. It turns out he's the former king. He demands to know what the whole scandal is about, telling them he could hear the clamor from his room. As soon as he spots Judith, he immediately goes to her and warmly hugs her, surprising everyone there. He tells her then that she's his sister, Princess Margaret Rumgart, or Greta's granddaughter. It so happens that she ran away from the palace when she was a young girl, following Judith's grandfather, who had nothing to offer but his nice looks. In fact, Judith remembers talking to her grandma when she was young, and she told her that she loved him for his looks basically, as it had been the bad handling of money of both Judith's grandpa and father that caused the Maybaum family to fall to ruin. Everyone, including Judith, is shocked as this means she's of royal blood. This would really solve issues, as her lying to the royal family would only turn out to be an inter-family dispute. Now, the old man is asking what the clamor was about, and Runegar promptly tells him that Greenhalghton has tarnished Judith's name, and so he challenged him to a duel. Thus, the old man resolves that Greenhalghton must accept the duel, and Isabella must be imprisoned for having tried to deceive the royal family. Greenhalghton steps in, telling the former king that Judith is deceiving him as well, but with a cold look, the old man tells them that obviously he had verified his facts before speaking. Greenhalghton then turns to Franz, asking him to mediate between him and Runegar, even starting to say that he was just following his orders, but he's interrupted by Franz before he can fully form that sentence. The guards escort him and Isabella out of the ballroom. Public opinion has now really changed, aiming against Greenhalghton rather than Judith. The former king then warmly goes to Judith, inviting her to go inside to talk about Greta. The king then tells Runegar that Judith should stay at the imperial palace now that it has been discovered she is of royal bloodline. But Runegar resists, telling him that it would be best for her to rest in the Winterwald townhouse as she might need time to adjust to all the changes. However, the old man won't have it. It seems he's grown too fond of Judith, even telling her to call him Grandpa, and just wants to spend time with her talking about Greta. He orders for Judith's maid to be brought from Winterwald, and any excuse Judith gives him as to why she should return to the townhouse is promptly turned down. So, she finally gives in. Luca then also says that if she stays, he'll stay as well, and before Judith can protest, he threatens her with mounting a scene. Thus, the banquet ends with Judith and Luca staying at the royal palace, while Rudiger reluctantly returns alone to the townhouse. Next morning rolls over and the former king is having breakfast alone with Judith, just as he'd asked. He asks about Greta, if she had lived a happy life and all, and is pleased to hear she was happy, but not so pleased to hear she had a happy married life. Turns out he never went looking for her after she ran away because of his pride, as he said some pretty mean things to her when she told him she was in love. But later, after Vanessa's death, about 20 years after Greta had left the palace, he realized that Greta could die as well, and thus he sent out people to look for her, wanting to ask for her forgiveness. But as he had little information on her, by the time they found her whereabouts, she had already passed. The old man then congratulates Judith for not having the same taste in men as Greta and apparently her older sister, who were easily swayed by good looks. He goes on to tell her that she doesn't have to associate with the Winterwalds anymore, and even though she protests about Luca, he tells her she can just send for him to the royal palace. He even adds that she'll inherit a fief and a manor that used to be Greta's, and so she shouldn't need to talk to Winterwalds anymore, clearly showing his hatred toward that family. Judith knows she won't ever leave Luca alone, but at the same time, the old man doesn't seem to want to listen to reason, and so she resorts to swaying his heart with cuteness, even calling him Grandpa to get out of that uncomfortable situation. It works incredibly well, and so she leaves the breakfast room with the old man enamored with her. While going back to her chambers, Judith stumbles upon a portrait of a young Margaret, and in fact, she's the spitting image of her grandma. It seems the only ones who inherited Greta's violet eyes were Vanessa and she, so she's starting to understand why the former king showed so much favoritism towards Vanessa and now towards her. It's a bit obsessive of him, picking favorites based off of eye color, and Judith fears this will make him hate Luca. Even more so, she's feeling a bit suffocated by his attitude towards her, already wanting to control her and take her away from Luca, so she wonders if maybe Vanessa felt the same way. Judith reaches her chambers where she finds Luca waiting for her. She thanks him for saving her by telling everyone Sophia told him the pocket watch had been stolen, and he admits then that he'd lied. Judith scolds him, asking him what'll happen if they send a telegram to Winterwald to verify his claims. But Luca reassures her Sophia is clever and she'll understand what to do quickly. In any case, Judith is now worried Rudiger hasn't shown up yet, even though he told her he'd go meet them the next day. She waited for him all day long, but in the end, he never showed up. And if you're wondering what happened to our charming leading man, well, let's just say he's having a bit of a crisis. I guess that's understandable considering everything that went down at the banquet. I mean, he just found out the woman he's in love with is a member of the royal family. That's gonna take some time to adjust to. Still, Judith is desperate to see him. When a maid comes knocking and announces there's a visitor from the Winterwald family, she hurriedly orders them in, hoping it's Rudiger. She's literally running at him with open arms when Lola walks through the doors. Talk about a letdown! Of course, it's still good to see her. Lola has already heard about what happened at the banquet and seems hungry for answers. Before she can start explaining, Judith asks about Rudiger and gets a vague answer. He said he'd come, but apparently he's been tied down with work, so she's not sure exactly when. Sounds like a pretty pathetic excuse if you ask me. Judith knows his schedule pretty well, and besides, they spent months preparing for Luca's debut banquet. What work could he possibly have now that it's over? Of course, Lola doesn't have the answer to any of these questions, and Judith is starting to hear herself. She sounds like a jealous girlfriend. All Lola can say is that some military work suddenly appeared, but judging by her nervous expression, it seems more like she was told to lie. Not wanting to make her any more uncomfortable, Judith moves on to more light-hearted topics, glad to hear that she'll be staying by her side at the palace from now on. Normally, personal servants aren't allowed in the royal palace. Looks like the former king has pulled some strings for his new favorite grandniece. Judith is hoping that once Rudiger is done with his work, he'll come and visit her at the palace. But after 3 days pass with no sign of him, she starts to get suspicious. I mean, He could have at least sent a letter or something. She's just starting to wonder if something bad has happened when a knock on the door announces Princess Victoria. As usual, she doesn't bother with the formalities and immediately makes a comment about her looking upset. You'd think a princess would have better manners. But at least she brought news. It turns out Runegar hasn't come to visit because he's been banned from the royal palace. That's right, and it was the former king who gave the order. What is it about the Winterwalds and the royal family? Considering half of them are related, they don't seem to have the best relationship. Judith thinks back to the banquet, trying to think what Runegar might have said to upset him. She suddenly remembers Royton Greenhalton, whom she hasn't heard anything about since the event. He was clearly acting on Franz's behalf, which means he might have valuable information to spill. But if the duel went ahead as planned, then he might already be dead. Panicked, Judith gets increasingly nervous, trying to figure out how to get word to Runegar and stop him slaying a very useful resource. Seeing how worried she looks, Victoria mistakes her concern for affection. For some reason, she was a lot more interested in the Judith-Runegar love story when she thought it was one-sided. Now that things seem mutual, she's lost all interest. For a moment, she wonders if Judith was in on the marriage plot the princess made with Runegar, but it's pretty clear from her discomfort that she didn't know a thing. Although she suspected they made some kind of pact, it could have been for the benefit of Princess Josephine. Just an excuse to change the subject. Something like that. Victoria opens up about what really happened that night. Runegar approached her before the banquet and asked her for a favor. If she could find a way to make her father, the king, give up on this marriage with Josephine, he promised to support her claim for the throne. Whoa, now that's a pretty big promise. Does he really want to be with Judith that badly? Or does he just hate the idea of marrying Josephine? Given that he also asked the princess to set the lovebirds up with a romantic atmosphere, I think it's safe to say the former. Although, as we all know, Victoria isn't exactly subtle. She probably wasn't the best person to entrust with that task. She was, however, the perfect person to settle any rumors about Runegar going after his dead brother's former lover. Victoria was pretty surprised when he approached her. She saw it as a weakness, something she could manipulate against him if she chose to do so. And she could have. We've already seen how outraged these nobles get over a bit of family drama. But Runegar implored her to do him this favor. He knows how affected Judith gets by the stares and whispers of people around her, so he wanted to make things more comfortable for her by getting Victoria to publicly voice her approval. Judith turns bright red after hearing that. Victoria hardly notices. She's too busy thinking how funny it would be to watch the famous Runegar Winterwald struggle with an unrequited crush. She's kind of a sadist, huh? After discovering that the colonel even confessed his feelings and is still waiting on Judith for an answer, she gets even more delighted. Poor guy must be in agony. Although the former king might be against their love, Victoria assures her she's on their side, mainly because it gives her a major advantage. There's a bet going on, you see. A lot of people are placing bets for who will take Judith's hand in marriage. Don't these nobles have estates to run or more important things to do? Victoria jokes that this is her fate now that she's been declared a member of the royal family. The newspaper that ran an article about her even sold out in the blink of an eye. The princess is certain she'll soon have love letters piling up on her desk. She just became the most eligible bride in all the kingdom. Judith is shocked to hear this. After all, there are 2 other princesses who should be higher up in the ranks than her, surely. Victoria explains that she holds a unique position, an advantage, if you like. She's Luca Winterwald's closest blood relative and clearly has a special bond with him. Everyone knows how much he respects her, which makes her a very important piece in the future of the Winterwald dukedom. That means she's going to have to keep an eye out for anyone trying to use her to get to Luca or even control him. What a twisted society! If that wasn't enough, the former king publicly expressed his affection for her. Like a linchpin between both the royal family and the Winterwalds, Judith just became the golden rose of the Rumcart kingdom. Of course, with the former king guarding her closely, everyone is keeping their distance for now. But it won't be long before people start vying for a shot. The question now is whether Runegar will follow through on his promises. As we know, he's never been interested in women before, so if he stepped forward and asked for her hand, no one would dare to oppose him. But if he doesn't, then it'll be a vicious fight. let's just hope Runegar finds a way to work around the former king. For now, it's a secret that Runegar has feelings for her. But him and the king are two of the most stubborn people in the country, so it's up to Judith to use her powers of persuasion and make them reach an understanding. So, no pressure or anything. Judith doubts that she really has any sway over her granduncle. I mean, isn't he just being nice to her because she reminds him of Greta? But as Victoria points out, she's the only person left from Greta's lineage. It's not like she's going to be replaced. She's got power and she needs to use it. As the princess advises her, it's time to be more confident in herself and in all the people who care about her. Because, let's be honest, there's practically a Judith fan club at this point. She is only spitting facts, but Judith is caught off guard by how kind the princess is being. Why is she bothering to give her advice, let alone take her side in this whole political mess? Victoria finds that kind of funny and says there's no reason not to, since Judith poses no threat to the throne. In fact, her potential marriage to Runegar only supports Victoria's claim for the crown. So really, she has plenty of reasons to help out. Even if she didn't, they're family now. One way or another, they'll be in each other's lives for a long time yet. What's the harm in being friends? Allies, even. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to really like this girl. In a world full of nobles who love to gossip and make bets, she's refreshingly honest. And there's something about her that puts Judith at ease. Their conversation makes her think back to her previous life when she spent so much time overthinking and trying to read other people. She never lived for herself. She was always just following the path laid out for her, trying to keep her true identity hidden, trying to toe the line. As Victoria points out, she doesn't have to live like that anymore. Everything is out in the open now anyway. She has the favor of two of the most powerful families in the country. Isn't it time to be a little more brave? For her own sake and for Luca's, it's time to take a stand. Inspired, Judith suddenly gets to her feet, excusing herself. Victoria doesn't seem upset. Actually, it's like she was trying to get this reaction all along. Wait, was that all a big scheme to get her to go see Runegar? Damn, this girl is good! The first thing Judith does is rush to the former king. He's happy to see her until she asks for permission to go to the Winterwald house. Then he's immediately a bundle of rage again. Judith tries to keep her nerve, knowing that he's not angry at her, not really. All of this is just his pent-up feelings about his sister, Princess Margaret. He's only trying to keep her locked up like this so the same thing can't happen again. But Judith is not her grandmother, and it's not her job to protect him from his own regrets. She stands her ground and challenges him. It's not like she's running away. She just wants to talk to Sir Winterwald and get a few things of hers from the townhouse. She even acts innocent, pretending she doesn't know about the order he gave to keep him out of the palace. The king doesn't really have a leg to stand on, though he does try. Every excuse he can think of is shot down, and when his guard is lowest, Judith breaks out her final move. Holding his hand, she assures him there's nothing to worry about, promising to always be by his side. One more charming smile, and he's finished. Total knockout. She promises to be back before sundown and immediately calls Lola to start the preparations. Her maid is impressed that she managed to sway the former king, who is famously stubborn as a mule. Looks like our girl finally knows her power. She leaves the palace as soon as the gates open the next morning, more determined than ever. The Winterwalds are shocked to see an imperial carriage rock up, and even more surprised when Judith climbs out of it. She doesn't bother with formalities, immediately asking after Runegar. The butler informs her he's been staying in her old room, the Iris Room. Oh my god, did he miss her so much he moved into her room? He's more of a softie than I thought. When she bursts into the room calling his name, she finds Runegar with his head in his hands. When he looks up, he can hardly believe what he's seeing. It's like she walked straight out of his dreams. He doesn't say a word, staggering towards her and pulling her suddenly into a tight hug. He still half thinks this is a dream, asking quietly if it's really her. Oh yeah, this man is down bad. Still on her streak of newfound confidence, she tries to hug him back, but her hands end up in a slightly awkward spot. Luckily, Runegar is still so distraught he doesn't seem to notice. She pulls back, using the excuse of seeing his face to get her hands out of the way. Just one look and it's clear he's not doing so good. He doesn't seem to have been eating much and isn't taking proper care of himself. Judith asks him to put his health first. After all, if he and the former king are going to keep fighting like this, then he'll need his stamina. It looks like she came at just the right time. If this stalemate had gone on any longer, Runegar was planning to threaten the king. He was literally ready to use the Winterwald name and start a war between the families to get her back. That's almost as cute as it is stupid. Judith tries to calm him down so they can have a real conversation. She asks how he's doing since the banquet. He must have been quite surprised to find out she was a member of the royal family. With his usual leading man flair, Runegar tells her he doesn't care if she's a peasant or a princess. I can't tell if that's dashing or kind of insulting. Just as she did, he also sees the double-edged blade in this turn of events. It's a shame that she's now under the protection of His Majesty, but on the other hand, it's great for her to have a stronger position in society. He just didn't realize quite how much the former king hated him. One way or another, something has to give between these two. First and foremost, he intends to request the ban against him be lifted so that he can at least visit her at the palace. Suddenly, Judith remembers Lord Greenhalton and asks if they've already dueled. He seems a little uncomfortable and asks if it would cause problems if they did. Oh god, is their lead on Franz already dead? Unfortunately, yes, but not in the way that you'd think. They never actually dueled because yesterday, he received word that Greenhalton took his own life. That's got Franz written all over it. There's no way he did that to himself. Apparently, he left a note saying he was too afraid to fight Runegar, which pretty much settled the matter. Ugh, what a disaster! Franz is always 2 steps ahead of them. Runegar doesn't understand why Judith is so upset, so she explains. In exchange for calling off the duel, she was going to ask him to be a witness and come clean about everything Franz has done. She never confided in Runegar about her suspicions until now, but at last, the time has come. Everything from Isabella showing up with the princess's watch all the way to Greenhalton's suspicious death. It was all coordinated by Franz. This is all news to Runegar. Honestly, he was more suspicious of his father, Count Birkenley, than Franz himself. He doesn't seem to understand Franz's motive, which is kind of hilarious considering how clear it is to Judith. Patiently, she explains the whole thing to him, about how Franz wants to take control of the Winterwald estate, and how he'll do so through any means necessary, even if that involves killing Luca. I mean, he already tried it once. It was him who sent the assassin on the train, remember? But as she points out, getting rid of Luca would require placing a spy among the maids in the Winterwald estate, which is no easy task. So it would need to be done by someone with power and authority. Someone like Judith. Now, you might be thinking, why the heck would Judith approve a spy being employed at the estate? Well, let's say Franz and Judith got close, especially if he was courting her, trying to earn her hand in marriage. Then maybe he could recommend someone for her service, or even worse, use her to get close to Luca and do the job himself. That's why he started looking into her background, because he failed to get close to her. Once it's all explained, Runegar seems to understand, which is a good thing. Franz will be after both of them, so they need to team up if they hope to defeat him. Runegar takes that as a sign that she's worried for him, but then he gets all sulky, asking if she's really just worried about Luca. Gosh, he's such a baby. Luckily, he doesn't take it too seriously. In fact, he finds it kind of cute how she gets all flustered trying to reassure him. Out of nowhere, he starts caressing her cheek and saying this is why he fell in love with her. Does anyone else have butterflies? Runegar sure can be smooth when he wants to be. Suddenly, Judith realizes she's been presented with the perfect opportunity to finally confront him about his feelings and how they developed. But let's be honest, our girl has never been the best at subtlety. So it's no surprise when she sort of just screams at him. After a heavy moment of awkward silence, she clarifies. Since he's never really mentioned why he fell in love, she's wondering what it is he likes about her. Now it's poor Runegar's turn to be embarrassed. He's not exactly the sensitive type. After taking a minute to think, he brings up the first time they met. Not when he came to her house, but the very first time. When he bumped into her at the intersection in Emden. He tried to help her up, but she stood straight up without so much as looking at him. Judith didn't even realize it was him until now. Though she didn't recognize him, Runegar never forgot her face. And when they first touched, he felt like he'd been struck by lightning. He then lists all the moments since they met where he's admired her, all the ways in which he's learned from Judith. The way she takes care of Luca, The way she reads a situation and acts bravely without hesitating, even if there's an assassin in the room. More than anything, her love and protective nature when it comes to Luca is one of his favorite things about her. It seems like all the simple memories that they've built on this journey have been precious to Rudiger all along. Even the little things like playing catch. At last, he confesses, and for a man who's never had much interest in women, he does one heck of a job. If this isn't love, then I will probably never know love. I mean, come on, what girl could survive that? Judith is so touched, especially when he admits that people have always preferred his brother Jonas over him. Caught up in the emotion, she tells him she would always have preferred him, even if she had met his brother first. Rudiger is so shocked that he grabs her, suddenly pulling her close enough to kiss. They both break away, blushing bright red. As he's apologizing, a sudden thumping at the door announces Wilhelm, the butler, with an urgent issue. Perfect timing, Wilhelm, thank you. And what is this urgent issue, you ask? It's Luca. As usual, Luca's Rudiger senses have been tingling. It takes him seconds to realize something happened between them, and even asks why the mood is so good. Judith denies it, but frankly, she's more concerned with the fact that Luca came here alone, all the way from the palace. Of course, he didn't just walk out the front door. After less than a week in the palace, he's already found a secret passage that let him slip out unnoticed. He really has a knack for this sort of thing. It's not something to be proud of, though clearly Rudiger is pleased. After he got out of the palace, Luca just hopped in a carriage using Rudiger's cash from their gambling session to pay for it. How old is Luca meant to be again? He's acting more like a teenage vagabond than a kid. Judith is worried that he might have been followed, or that maybe someone saw how much cash he was carrying and could be after him. But Luca is smarter than that. Besides, he was headed to the townhouse. What lunatic would try to harm someone connected to the Winterwald family? Judith is still furious. He thinks he's grown up enough to move as he pleases, but his aunt says no. When he keeps talking back, she suddenly snatches him up, just to prove how easy he would be to kidnap. I mean, she's got a point. Once the two of them are done fighting like children, she asks why he didn't just come with her in the first place. I guess she left too early for him to tag along. He was actually planning to throw a tantrum and force her to let him tag along, since he'd figured she'd refuse otherwise. But by the time he got up, she was gone. Still, it seems like he was pretty determined to come, so what's the big deal? It turns out he also had something to say to Rudiger. A favor, actually. Always pleased to have something on the kid, Rudiger immediately turns this to his advantage. If Luca calls him uncle, he'll grant any wish he wants. If not, he gets nothing. Predictably, Luca is outraged. Technically, Rudiger is his uncle, but it's not like they're really that close. To everyone's surprise, however, he gives up without much of a fight. He calls him uncle once, pretty unconvincingly, and asks him to keep an eye on Franz Birkenley. Looks like aunt and nephew are on the same page after all. Ideally, he wants reports from time to time, but since Rudiger is banned from entering the palace, he'll settle for the promise that he'll keep an eye out. Judith is surprised that he also suspects Franz. But after everything that happened at the banquet, it would be weirder if he didn't. After a few jokes from Rudiger about being asked for the same favor twice, Luca realizes that his aunt came all the way to ask the same thing. Whoopsie, that whole uncle thing was all for nothing then. While he's freaking out about the waste of affection, Rudiger is a little embarrassed. If even a 10-year-old boy could tell Franz was involved, then he should have noticed too. At least, that's what he thinks. But it wasn't that simple. If Judith hadn't known from the start who to be wary of, she might never have made the connection herself. But then, how did Luca know? Little by little, pieces of doubt have been embedding themselves in her mind since the start of this transmigration story. I mean, come on, we've all noticed it. Luca doesn't act like a 10-year-old, and he certainly doesn't act like the original character from the novel. He must have transmigrated too. But if that's true, then who the heck is he? And does Judith really have the right to find out? I mean, it's not like she can just casually pull him aside and ask. Plus, it wouldn't really change anything, not for her at least. Luca or not, he's still her nephew. Even if he doesn't think of her as an aunt, she will continue to protect him like one. While she's watching him closely, Luca asks if she has any further business to address at the Winterwald estate. As a matter of fact, Judith still has one last question. What happened to Thomas? In case you're just as confused as Runegar, Thomas was the guy from Emden Village that Lord Greenhalton brought to prove she wasn't Luca's mom. You know, potato guy? Runegar immediately asks if she's worried about him, missing the point entirely. Of course, she doesn't want anything bad to happen to him, but it's not like she cares about him. I mean, come on, that guy doesn't even begin to compare to Runegar. Judith is actually kind of offended that he even thinks she might have liked that stupid potato head. Feeling Luca's eyes burning into her, she tries to recover herself, not wanting to get carried away. In the end, Thomas seemed to be taking her side in the whole banquet mess, so she just wanted to check if he made it back to Emden safely. Runegar seems satisfied at that, but he hasn't heard anything. He promises to look into it later and asks if there's anything else on her mind. At last, Judith's fears have been put at ease, for now at least. She just asks him one last time to be careful with Franz. Even though she's mentioned it about 4 times by now, she really does trust him. Runegar has known Franz his whole life, but when Luca and Judith raised their suspicions, he immediately took their side and agreed. He's such a reliable guy. It makes Judith wish she confided in him earlier. Luca starts encouraging them to head back to the palace. He's not exactly subtle. It's pretty obvious he just wants to separate his aunt and uncle. But Judith isn't in a rush to get back to the palace. Dealing with the former king is exhausting. Her inner thoughts end up leaking out, and she throws a temper tantrum like a child, throwing herself across Luca's lap and complaining that she doesn't want to go. Let's be honest, this isn't just about the former king. Her and Runegar are finally opening up about their feelings, and they still have a lot to discuss. She plucks up the courage to ask her nephew for some time alone, and he refuses instantly. She starts scolding him, but once again, Luca outsmarts her. According to him, adults only ever talk about money, politics, or love. They're not going to talk about money, and if they were going to talk politics, then he would be involved, so that leaves only one thing. Damn, this kid is smart! Although, I'm starting to wonder why he's so opposed to Judith and Runegar getting hitched. As always, she gets flustered at the slightest mention of love and suddenly changes the topic, suggesting they go and play catch together. Of all the things to suggest. At least Luca seems to be getting better. Judith challenges him with an extra hard shot and he gets embarrassed, unknowingly giving his aunt and uncle exactly the alone time they were hoping for. He sits down under the shade of the tree while Runegar steps in to play instead. Judith takes the opportunity to ask him about his reputation for dueling. Apparently, he's fought over 40 times. She assumes he just made a lot of enemies in his life, but he reveals that most of them were actually fought on behalf of Jonas. You see, if you're challenged to a duel, you're allowed to send someone to fight in your place. Knowing that his brother was a far better fighter than him, Jonas usually sent Runegar instead. Which is kind of messed up. I mean, we all know Runegar is talented, but how could he send his little brother to clear up his own mess? So much for brotherly love. To her surprise, Runegar defends him. A lot of these duels were called because men would get jealous of Jonas. It's not like he was actually having affairs, he was just a handsome guy. He always got attention from women, and after a while, the noblemen began to take it personally. Judith admits it is impressive that he held back from getting involved in an affair, but his son seems less impressed. It's not like he wasn't still flirting with girls on the side. Luca himself is proof of that. Anyway, back to Runegar's dueling history. He said most of the duels were for Jonas, not all of them. The others mostly happened in the early days after enlisting in the military. He rose to the position of officer much earlier than his peers, and as always, his talent rubbed some people the wrong way. The way he tells it makes it sound like he did nothing wrong, but all 43 of those duels ended in a death, so he's not exactly blame-free. At that point, he's more like a serial killer. Not wanting to continue the conversation, Judith asks about cricket. Apparently, matches are held fairly often in the capital, so she asks if they could go and watch one sometime. Luca's couple senses must have been tingling because the next second he's beside Judith, saying there's no way he'd let them go just the two of them. Oh, Luca, why won't he just let them be? Before they can have another argument, Wilhelm appears with the imperial carriage. It's time for them to go back to the palace. The former king ordered them to be back before sundown, remember? If they're even a few minutes late, I don't even want to imagine the fuss he'd cause. A little disappointed, Judith reluctantly turns to bid Runegar farewell. But he's even more reluctant than she is and actually grabs her dress, not wanting to let her go. Ugh, right in the feels. He's really so cute when he wants to be. Runegar offers to accompany them back to the palace, but obviously that's not an option. Not with the former king in the picture. Luca doesn't like them being so dramatic. The truth is, he doesn't want to go back either, but if they ignore Grandpa's command, they probably won't be allowed to leave the palace again. And that's the best case scenario. The worst is the royal family declaring war on Winterwald. With a civil war on the cards, Judith wraps up her goodbyes, promising to try and convince her grandfather as soon as possible. The heartache of leaving Rudiger behind again is cut short by Luca's sassy comments, but she really is determined. Things can't go on like this forever. One way or another, something's gotta give. When they arrive back at the palace, the tension is palpable. The king runs up to Judith at once, clearly relieved to see her. She's surprised to see him outside in the cold. It looks like he spent the whole day worrying. When Judith left, he went to see Luca and realized he was missing. They thought she'd run back off to Winterwald for good. I guess threatening civil war wasn't such an exaggeration after all. Once the palace has calmed down, Judith sits down for dinner with her grandfather, wondering how to approach the issue of Rudiger. She won't feel comfortable visiting if there's this much commotion every time, so the first thing to do is lift the ban. She starts off smoothly, promising to eat dinner with the former king every night, even if she went out that day. But it backfires. According to him, there's no need for her to leave the palace again for a while, especially since she saw Rudiger today. Uh-oh, maybe she'll have better luck tomorrow. When Judith visits Luca that evening, she's exhausted. She's kind of mad that he didn't have dinner with them and try to help. But as he points out, the king only has eyes for her. He probably wouldn't have been much help anyway. He's wearing that expression again, the one that makes him look twice his age. Remembering the realization she came to at the townhouse, she decides it's now or never. Time for a little chat. But how the heck do you start that conversation? Hey, Luca, is there any chance you came from a different world and ended up possessing a body of a 10-year-old child? No? Okay, good talk. I sure as heck wouldn't know where to begin. But Judith chooses her words carefully. Even he must know it's kind of strange for a kid. He kept up so easily in class despite never attending proper lessons before and immediately picked up on noble etiquette. In fact, he struggled less than Judith, and she's an adult. It's almost like this isn't his first time, like he's seen this all before somehow. There's a heavy moment of silence after that, which almost proves her point. If he was the real Luca, wouldn't he try to deny it or act confused? Instead, he's just sitting there staring back at her with those intense eyes of his. A little flustered, she starts to reassure him. He's not in trouble or anything. But Luca turns the unspoken question on her instead. After all, isn't Judith the one who had a bigger change of personality? Luca knows better than anyone what his old aunt was like. She pretty much did a total 180, suddenly acting like a different person one day. And that's not the only odd thing about her. To be fair, Judith never really pretended to be much like her character. She was a horrible aunt and a jealous woman, so she didn't have much motivation to keep hidden. Plus, Luca kind of just rolled with her sudden personality change, so she thought she got away with it. Now, it seems like he's known the truth the whole time and just kept quiet for her sake. Should she tell him the truth? That she's not from this world? That this body doesn't belong to her? And if she did, what would happen? Maybe he'd be hurt. Maybe he's not really a transmigrator, then he'd just think she was crazy. As she's internally freaking out, Luca says he's actually grateful. She's helped him a lot so far, which is why he didn't bring this up earlier. He doesn't say what he actually means, just that now isn't the time. Later, when it's all over, that's when they can discuss it. He couldn't be more mysterious if he tried. I don't know about you guys, but I'm 100% Luca is a transmigrator too. There's no way he's not. He doesn't answer any of her questions, just starts walking toward the door. The last thing he tells her is not to give her heart to Rudiger. Whoops, a little late for that one, buddy. He seems convinced that Rudiger is and always will be an unaffectionate person. If Judith gets involved with him, she'll only get hurt. Is it just me, or does it sound like he's speaking from experience? This is all getting so complicated. My head is spinning. She tries to ask him more questions, but Luca is determined not to answer. Desperate, she yells out that she loves him, just in case he doesn't know. Of course he does, but for whatever reason, Luca is determined to accomplish his mission alone. He coldly tells her to stop worrying about him and storms off. Maybe he just hit puberty a little early? He's certainly acting like a moody teenager these days. Once he's gone, Judith turns back to the newspaper he was reading, which is all about the rum cart kingdom economy. See, What kind of kid reads about the nation's finances? He's gotta be a shifter. Suddenly, it clicks. He's trying to figure out how Franz is funding his schemes. After all, he can't just use his family's money whenever he likes. He must be involved in some kind of business to be hiring all these people and bring the Winterwalds down. She remembers a conversation with Runeger where he talked about the competition for the railroad contracts. Winterwald managed to win the contracts because of their position in the fuel industry, a position that would benefit hugely from improved railway access. Maybe that's what Franz is up to, distributing Winterwald fuel illegally to pay for his plotting. But then how did Luca figure this out? Is it even happening yet? Or is this just a prediction for the future? Either way, it's not like Judith can really do anything. Luca clearly isn't going to be opening up again anytime soon. So for now, she has to go back to acting dumb and do what she can to protect him. For the next few days, Luca ignores her completely, finding 1,000 excuses not to see her in the palace. While she's getting moody over a cup of tea, Lola sneaks in, acting sus as heck, and drags her outside for a walk around the gardens. This has Runeger written all over it. Judith is starting to get really panicky, especially since Lola won't explain why she's dragged her out to the most isolated corner of the grounds at dusk. The next second, our leading man emerges from the bushes, looking a little worse for wear. Did he have to crawl through the bushes just to get here? For a minute, Judith thinks his ban might have been lifted, but come on, do we really think the king would change his mind that quickly? He actually heard about the secret passage Luca mentioned on their last visit and bribed Princess Victoria with a crate full of diamonds to find out where it was. Talk about dedication! Ladies, if your man wouldn't swap a crate of diamonds just to see you, is he even your man? Judith is a little stressed by his appearance. It looks like he's been waiting a while, and with the weather getting colder, he must be freezing. She starts untying her cloak to give to him, but Runeger grabs her hands, absolutely refusing. She asks if he has any business with her, but he literally just wanted to see her. He's really just that romantic. He also has a question he forgot to ask from last time. A question which requires him being on his knees? Oh God, surely this isn't what it looks like. He apologizes for rushing her, but by now he's desperate. With those gorgeous baby blue eyes, he asks for the answer to his confession. Will she accept him and become a real couple? Or is that too dangerous? Besides, there's 1,000 things they still have to take care of. They're not out of danger yet, and if she became blinded by love, it might put her in even more danger. But then she looks at Runeger and all that seems to melt away. He quietly apologizes for pressuring her and tells her he doesn't need love in return. All he wants is permission to love her quietly on his own. Oh my God, I think my heart just shattered. With tears in her eyes, Judith tells him that she likes him too, more than he knows. Actually, like doesn't even begin to cover it. He might not be the first person she's cared for like this, but that doesn't make her feelings any less strong. The truth is that she loves him. There! At last she said it! Runeger goes bright red immediately. Apparently, he somehow missed all the countless signs that she liked him back. He's even blinder than we thought. Still, it's adorable seeing the way he asks for confirmation. This man is literally thanking God on his knees right now. The famous cold-hearted Runeger Winterwald has finally been tamed. Go Judith! Judith asks if he made a prayer to God for some kind of request. Runeger says no, but as a nobleman, he makes donations fairly often, so he was just thinking maybe God returned the favor. Judith can't help but laugh out loud. But she gets quiet again when Runeger gets to his feet, calling her his lover. Ooh, saucy. I guess they don't say things like girlfriend and boyfriend in the Rumcart Kingdom. Of course, they can't roll the credits just yet. There's still the small issue of the former king and his lifelong hatred of the Winterwald family. If they want to be together for real, there's a long list of things they'll have to sort out. It makes them both miss the days where they spent all their time together, traveling from Emden to Winterwald and never being apart. It feels like such a luxury now. Judith admits that once they were separated, she felt this kind of void where he used to be. Runeger gets all quiet and suddenly confesses that he doesn't care much for things like marriage. Or at least, that's what he used to think. Now he can hardly sleep. He feels sort of helpless not having her by his side. And if marriage would change that, then, well, let's just say he'd be dropping back down on his knees in no time. At this point, you might be wondering what he's so anxious about. I mean, the feelings are mutual, right? Well, that's true. But given how kind and gentle Judith's personality is, Runegar is seriously worried that the former king might somehow find a way between them, taking advantage of her kindness. With that fear in mind, he asks what she would say if he proposed to her. Oh my gosh, isn't that basically a proposal in itself? Come on, Runegar, where are the roses? If he's gonna do it, he should do it properly. I'm pretty sure Judith just had a heart attack. She only agreed to start dating a few minutes ago, and he's already asking about marriage. But let's be real, it's not like they haven't both thought about it before. Plus, in the Rumcart Kingdom, marriage is kind of the way to be together. If they want to save their reputations, that is. Judith is already head over heels for him, so she assures him that she would definitely say yes. That comes as a major relief to Runegar, and he promises to make preparations for a more impressive proposal in the future. That's right, he can't pop the question with mud on his face. Returning the same question she asked him before, he asks what exactly Judith likes about him. Isn't it obvious? The man is literally carved from marble. Who wouldn't fall for that face? Judith starts babbling about all the things she likes, but for some reason she can only think of his appearance. Most guys might be a little upset that there's not more beneath the surface, but Runegar actually seems relieved. At last, his good looks have come in handy. Though he takes it kind of in a weird way, talking about all the other guys who have similar features and saying he won't have any competition from the other dudes in high society. Okay? Judith doesn't want to correct him and ruin the moment, so she says nothing. There'll be plenty of time later to tell him all the reasons she fell for him. As they're standing there, the first snowflakes of the season begin to fall. Isn't that convenient? I'm sure you all know the legend that your love will come true if you're with the right person on the first snow of the year. It's like even the heavens are on their side. There's just one small thing that makes her worry. What would he say if she told him the truth? That this isn't her body and she's not really Judith? Before she can even think about telling him, they get a warning that someone's coming. She tries to shove Runegar into a better hiding spot, but he pulls her into a hug instead, quietly bidding her goodbye with that husky voice of his. Okay, I can't lie. I'm jealous of Judith. This guy isn't even real, but he keeps giving me butterflies. He runs back to the secret passageway, and Judith watches him go, equal parts scared and excited. A few weeks go by, and the young lovers are unable to meet up. After a while, Judith writes a letter asking for a favor. Runegar, as always, is only too happy to follow her request and heads into town in search of one David Anderson, who he finds in a sorry state, fighting a fever in his house. If you're wondering who this guy is, look again at the second name. While Runegar is after the son, Judith is being presented with his mother, Isabella Anderson, the woman Franz was using to try and frame her. After all these weeks, she's finally been allowed to meet her in person. Isabella has been locked up all this time and has clearly developed a bit of an attitude, though it kind of seems like she had that before. The guard is getting kind of snappy, so Judith asks him to leave the room and give her, Isabella, and Lola some privacy. He seems hesitant, but obeys. That's the perk of being a princess, I guess. He leaves her tied and restrained to a chair, asking her to call right away if there are any issues. As soon as they're alone, Isabella jokes that she's pretty bold for a royal. Even with her hands tied, she could still take a bite out of her neck if she wanted to. Yikes, this woman is no joke. But Judith doesn't seem threatened. In fact, she kind of sees this whole situation as karma. However, instead of rubbing her position in Isabella's face, she cuts to the chase. She wants proof against Franz, proof that he tried to mess up the Winterwald family with her and Greenhalten. After a moment of serious tension, Isabella plays it cool, not giving anything away except the pocket watch, the critical piece of evidence they tried to use against her at the banquet. Isabella points out that the one who stole it was Lord Greenhalten, so he obviously knew more about the situation than she did. He's the guy she should be questioning. Uh-oh, I guess she doesn't know he's dead. Judith breaks the news, giving her prisoner quite the shock. She then offers a deal, evidence on Franz in exchange for her freedom. But Isabella doesn't seem completely convinced. Even if she is released, who's to say she won't get taken advantage of again? Or worse, maybe Franz would go after her next. She seems to think Franz is taking good care of her son David in her absence, which is kind of sad. Judith has to correct her. David was found this morning in a dangerous state, exhausted from hunger and cold. He's been neglected ever since she was captured. It's lucky the Winterwald got to him in time, or he might not have made it. That makes Isabella change her tune. Hearing that her child was on death's door makes her freak out. Furious with Franz for lying to her and putting her son in danger, Judith reassures her that David will recover and be taken good care of at Winterwald. But Isabella is too far gone. In a state of fury, she throws her chair onto the floor, begging Judith to get her out and protect her from Franz. In exchange, she promises to be as helpful as she can. The princess seems suspicious at first, so she tries to prove herself. As we suspected, she didn't join hands with Franz willingly. He threatened her and said that if she didn't do as he said, he'd make her and David's lives so miserable they'd rather die. Jeez. With that threat on one hand and the promise that her son would become heir to a dukedom on the other, Isabella truly had no choice. As a mother, her hands were tied. Still, she apologizes now to Judith, feeling stupid for trusting Franz's promises and making all these excuses. But unfortunately, she has nothing else to offer in terms of proof. Franz was too smart to reveal his plans to her. Even though David is his son, he would never trust the mother of his illegitimate child. Though she can't give much evidence, Isabella promises to do whatever she can to help, whatever it takes to bring him down. Judith is shocked by her resolution, the pure determination of a mother protecting her son. Standing there, watching her pleading for her and her son's life, Judith has to remind herself that this woman is still an enemy. Because of her, Luca went through some serious hardships, and those rumors will likely follow him for life. But then again, isn't this just like the plot of the book? Everyone seems to have suffered in some horrible ways, and as Judith moves through the story, she can't help thinking to herself, was this character always like this? The characters who seem two-dimensional in the book are now complex, multifaceted people, real people who have motivations and struggles of their own. So the question is Isabella Anderson really trustworthy? Or is she true to her original character from the book? To try and find out the truth, she asks about how she and Franz met. Isabella tells the story of her youth, when she was just a young commoner girl who got taken advantage of. Maybe things were different on her side, but it's clear that Franz was only ever using her from the start. That really tugs on Judith's heartstrings. I mean, how could it not? This woman has done nothing wrong. She was forced into this situation. Feeling sympathetic, Judith promises to do her best. She'll protect David and his mother and try her best to get her pardoned for her crimes. Only on the condition that she is loyal to Judith in the future. Of course, Isabella might be lying, but even if she is, they can use her to trap Franz. So it's a win-win situation for Judith. So long as she's careful. The deal is done. Later that evening, Judith visits Luca, who has somehow found out all about her secret meeting already. How does this boy know everything? He also seems to know that she didn't get evidence against Franz. I guess he considered that course of action already and decided it was pointless. Sensing his disdain, Judith starts rambling about how she gave Isabella a pardon and trying to prove she wasn't being stupid. But Luca isn't actually mad. She can make decisions for herself. If that's what she thought was right, then that's fine. Even when Judith admits she plans to take Isabella as a maid, Luca agrees. His aunt is more than surprised. She wasn't sure what would happen if he disapproved of her decision. Luca just sighs. Before they met at the Winterwald townhouse, he was more wary about her because he didn't know her intentions. After they both asked Rudiger to keep an eye on Franz, it became clear that they're on the same side, working towards the same goal. What does it matter if they take a different route to get there? The only thing Luca cares about is being kept in the loop. He doesn't want her to hide things in future, and he promises to do the same. From now on, they should discuss their next moves together. He makes a comment about her always treating him like a child, and Judith tries to explain herself. It's not that she looks down on him. He seems to forget sometimes that he's supposed to be a kid, so she's trying to look out for him, remind him how to act like one. These two keep dancing around the point. When will they get the courage up to just admit they're both transmigrators? Regardless, Judith is going to have a tough time convincing the king about pardoning Isabella. And it looks like Luca won't be giving her any help on that front. The next day, she makes an attempt to breach the subject with the king, and he's exactly as mad as we expected. But with her brilliant powers of persuasion and probably a bit of cuteness, Judith eventually comes out victorious, gaining a pardon for Isabella and the king's permission to keep her as a personal maid. Now it's back to her main mission, trying to get Runeger's ban lifted. Dealing with Isabella was one thing, but that's a whole nother issue. It's even harder because they can't get in contact with each other very often. Judith is starting to get frustrated. They had that beautiful, romantic confession and agreed to start dating, but all they've done since is write letters. Are they lovers or pen pals? Starting to get desperate, she visits Victoria and Melina for advice. But they seem surprised. The king is already the nicest to her out of everyone. They can't suggest anything. When they were younger, Princess Vanessa lived in such strict conditions, only meeting the people the king wanted and living where he told her to. Really, Judith should be grateful that she's even allowed out of the palace. Eventually, the Princess Melina comes up with an idea. Why don't they hold another banquet? After all, the last one was such a mess, and they haven't had an opportunity since to introduce Judith to society as a true royal. And if the royal family is throwing a banquet, the dukedoms will obviously have to attend. That means the king will have to lift Runeger's ban. Even if it's temporary, it would be a good start. The only thing she has to do is not mention it until then. Judith is delighted and thanks the princesses for their help. Melina takes the opportunity to ask her to drop the formalities. After all, she's actually her aunt. Judith is more than a bit surprised. Because of her grandmother Greta and how she came back and won the king's affection without having to earn it, she thought Melina would hate her. After all, the reason Vanessa was kept under lock and key was because of Greta running away. And because of that, the other siblings, including Melina, never received much of their father, the former king's affections. But too much time has passed for Melina to carry that grudge, especially towards Judith. Besides, as she's experiencing for herself firsthand, having the king's affection isn't always a good thing. Plus, Judith reminds her so much of Vanessa that it's kind of nice to have her here. Maybe she can even use her as a model to draw her sister again. Melina's plan works like a charm. All Judith has to do is make up a few rumors about the royal family not accepting her as a relative, and he decides to throw an enormous banquet at once. What she didn't realize is just how much work it would be to actually prepare for such an occasion. As the star of the show, all the decorations, dishes, colors of the curtains, even down to the carpet, she has to approve every little thing. Plus, the servants keep talking back, not taking her opinion and correcting all her choices. What was the point of asking in the first place? In the end, Judith gets overwhelmed and convinces Luca to help her with the paperwork. It's far easier for him, with his big brain, to get through it all. He also points out that Franz will likely be attending the banquet, something she hadn't thought about until now. After all, he's technically part of the Winterwald family too. Until now, he was being kept out by the band just like Runeger was. She'll have to be on her best behavior at this banquet, especially with so many eyes watching. For once, there will also be someone of Luca's own age. Princess Charlotte has been given permission to attend the banquet as his escort, despite not having debuted in society yet. It seems like the two of them already know each other. In fact, Luca seems quite charmed by her. The next day, Isabella is formally introduced as a member of Judith's personal maids. She finished her training, but doesn't quite have that delicate servant's attitude just yet. Ideally, Judith would send her to Winterwald right away so she can see David, but since she made a rather public appearance at the last banquet, she'll have to keep her head down for now. If Isabella is up to something, this brief period of chaos would be the perfect time to do it. Luckily, Lola has already agreed to keep an eye on her and report any suspicious activity to her mistress. They make a good team, those two. At last, the day of the long-awaited banquet arrives. Judith is dressed up in the finest, most bejeweled gown, though it is a little heavy. It's also kind of outdated, but Judith really doesn't care. One man who does, however, is the former king, who bursts straight into her chambers ready to shower her in compliments. Now I see why she's wearing such an old style. It reminds him of Greta. Wow, Lola really knows her stuff. It's not exactly comfortable to be acting like a replacement Greta, but it will certainly give her an advantage with the king. He escorts her personally to the ballroom, where Princess Charlotte and Luca are waiting just outside. This is the first time Judith has actually met Charlotte in person. She's just as pretty as she is polite, and very excited for her first experience of high society. She's especially friendly to Judith, who she's decided to see as another big sister. The king appears soon after, followed by Victoria, who looks particularly stunning. She tries to rush everyone into the hall before Samuel, the first prince, and her elder brother appears. The two of them have a classic sibling relationship. They look like they spent their whole childhoods fighting. The king breaks them up and gently moves everyone into the ballroom. He addresses the guests with a big speech, thanking the servants for their efforts and introducing Judith to the guests formally as a member of the royal family. It's a hella stressful situation, but as soon as she locks eyes with Runegar, everything seems to fade away. Then Victoria makes a little comment about her looking forward to this event, which suddenly makes her pulse spike. Did the two of them plan something again? Judith watches, beginning to panic as Runegar walks through the crowd, making his way right to the front of the ballroom and kneeling in front of her. The first thing he does is apologize. He wanted to wait until the banquet had kicked off a little more, but the moment he saw her, his feet started moving. To everyone's shock, he gets down on one knee and pulls out a perfect, beautiful diamond ring. Oh my god, it's really happening, you guys! Everybody stay calm. Judith stands rooted to the spot, completely floored by Rudiger's bold and lavish proposal. At the same time, Luca and Grandpa burst out in disbelief, furious at being blindsided and that Rudiger decided on this grand gesture without Judith's knowledge. Judith, flustered, tries to explain that she was aware of Rudiger's plans, although she never expected him to propose today out of all days. However, Luca refuses to listen, claiming he never even knew they were a couple, and proclaims that Rudiger does not deserve her. Grandpa jumps in, backing Luca, and insists Rudiger's proposal is improper because it ignored royal tradition. One thing is clear. Luca and Grandpa's fierce protectiveness shows just how much they cherish Judith. Meanwhile, Victoria and Samuel can hardly hide their amusement as they watch Grandpa fret over the proposal, their delight only growing when they learn that Rudiger actually consulted Judith. Rudiger tries to propose once more, but Luca suddenly snatches the ring, objecting loudly. Anticipating this, Rudiger smoothly produces a second ring and slips it onto Judith's finger. Seeing this, Grandpa erupts, refusing to accept Rudiger as Judith's fiancé, and even threatening to break the royal family's contract with Winterwald. To everyone's shock, Rudiger remains unfazed, even as Grandpa tries to declare war. Finally, the king intervenes, calming everyone and asking Judith to stay in her room for now. Judith tries to protest, insisting she should not be the one confined, but the guards move in and begin escorting her away. Rudiger, witnessing the scene, attempts to reach Judith, but is blocked by the guards. Undeterred, he then pushes past them with ease. Seeing Rudiger's unstoppable strength, the king then shouts orders and threatens the guards. If they fail to restrain Rudiger, they will lose 2 months' pay. The guards, now desperate, plead with Rudiger to stop, while others hurriedly drag Judith to her room. They apologize as they go, explaining that they're only following orders. But amid the chaos, Judith calls out to Rudiger, loudly accepting his proposal for everyone to hear. The guards caught in the middle seem just as stressed as everyone else. Once in her room, Judith's knees buckle beneath her, and she finally feels the exhaustion and madness of the ballroom ordeal. Laura remarks on the commotion and how much effort Rudiger put into his proposal, even if his methods were quite questionable. She then points out that, with Judith's public acceptance, Judith is now officially a lady of Winterwald. Listening to Laura, she realizes that in the past, she was only called Milady because of her title as Jonas's woman, but this time, she's officially Rudiger's fiancée. Under her orders, Laura heads downstairs to gather information about the events at the banquet. Left alone, Judith then collapses onto her bed, savoring a moment of peace. But her rest is short-lived as Luca bursts in, eager to discuss the engagement. And his first sentiment? He hates and disapproves of Rudiger for Judith. He insists that Rudiger does not truly love her and is only using her for his own gain. Curious, he even wonders when this thing between them started. Sheepishly, she confesses that Rudiger confessed to her in the palace garden on the first snowy day, and she really meant to tell Luca sooner or later, but, well, stuff happened. Luca clicks his tongue. Rudiger really isn't winning him over anytime soon. Judith rises to defend Rudiger, fully certain that he would never exploit her for political gain. With genuine curiosity, she then questions Luca why he distrusts Rudiger so much. Luca answers simply, Rudiger is incapable of real love or tenderness. Hearing this, Judith wonders how he can be so certain. These last few weeks, Rudiger has been nothing but nice to Luca as he watches over him. Heck, she is sure he'd even risk his own life for Luca if need be. Luca nods, conceding, but says this only fuels his doubt. If Rudiger really cared, he wouldn't sacrifice his life so easily out of fear for those he'd leave behind and hurt. Something tells me Luca's bottling up some feelings, because he sounds like he's speaking from experience. While Judith respects Luca's opinions, she reminds him that claiming to know someone fully is a kind of arrogance. After all, people are intricate, shaped by hidden pasts neither of them can fully understand. Desperate to prove a point, Luca cuts in, asking how Rudiger would react if he learned Judith's secret. The questions catches her off guard, but both answer in unison, admitting that he would probably love her regardless. Suddenly, realization hits Judith. Maybe the reason Luca is so guarded about Rudiger is because he too once cared for Rudiger and was left wounded. Poor child, struggling to find the words for his feelings. Judith then wraps Luca in a warm embrace, and as she does, memories of Luca and Rudiger's bond in the novel flood her mind. Rudiger had stepped forward as Luca's guardian, vowing to care for him as his own son, and Luca believed it. For the first time, he felt the gentle warmth of a parent's love. Life was great for them, until one day, assassins came after them as they headed to Luca's school. Outnumbered, Rudiger told Luca that he would stay behind to hold off the assailants so Luca could escape, but Luca didn't want that. Panic-stricken, he pleaded for Rudiger to stay with him and not to put his life on the line. But Rudiger remained resolute, his face unreadable as he instructed Luca to remember everything he had taught him. Once more, Luca refused to accept this, desperately begging his uncle to stay and calling him the father he never had. But Rudiger abruptly silenced him, declaring that he never loved Luca, that he was incapable of love and had only acted out of duty. My heart aches for Luca, but I can see Rudiger's side too. His words hit Luca like a rock to the head. Then, without a second thought, Rudiger stepped out of the carriage, ordering Hans to escort and protect Luca safely to the academy. Remembering all this, Judith finally understood why Luca struggled to trust Rudiger's love for her. But just then, she begins questioning her own memory. When did she even read about Luca and Rudiger's bond? Suddenly, Judith pauses. Her knowledge about the novel's plot seems to be different from her own memories. For example, Hans, who was once just a minor character, seems to have become central to helping and protecting Luca. Slowly, doubt creeps in. Are these just details she forgot? Or did the chain of events diverge from the novel? Heck, she even begins doubting if any of her memories are real. The confusion grows so intense that her head throbs with pain and she collapses, leaving Luca panicking and desperately calling out for help. After a few days, Judith finally wakes up, and Laura breathes a sigh of relief. Immediately, Laura asks how she's feeling, recalling how she suddenly fainted and shocked Luca. But Judith can only wonder if her sudden blackout and the headache were warnings, but she pushes the thought aside for now. Catching her up to date, Laura relays what went down at the banquet as soon as she left and passed out. Apparently, the event ended early, but not before the former king lost his temper with Rudiger, declaring that he would never marry Judith as long as he lived. In response, Rudiger joked that he should start preparing Grandpa's grave, which only made the old man even more furious. The situation got so bad that he was even imprisoned briefly. Thankfully, he was released the next day, but well, now he's in probation. And to top it all off, House Winterwald was hereby banned from the palace once more. Thanks to Rudiger's actions, rumors of House Winterwald getting expelled from the capital become the talk of the town. The alarming news is exactly why the Duke and Duchess of Winterwald are headed to the capital as they speak. Oh jeez, how will she ever face Duchess Sophia now? Laura then hands Judith the newspaper, where news of her engagement makes headlines. People are amazed by how openly smitten Rudiger is, and how he doesn't bother to hide his feelings for her. Just then, Judith notices Isabella, who looks like she's itching to say something. And yup, she is. She informs Judith that she met Franz. Oh, I'm sensing another problem coming. Isabella tells Judith that when she met Franz, he insisted she become his spy and report Judith's every move to him. He thinks that Isabella might just become his eyes and ears at the palace. Judith thanks Isabella for the warning and asks her to stay in contact with Franz. After all, she's eager to discover what secrets he's after. Hearing this, Isabella nods, promising to become someone she can trust. Still, a shadow of doubt lingers. Will Isabella remain loyal? Later, Laura asks Judith if she plans to tell Rudiger about Franz, but Judith hesitates, fearing Rudiger might overreact. She decides to wait until she has a solid plan, and Laura agrees. However, she urges Judith to keep Luca in the loop, because if she won't, then she'll tell him herself. Before long, Luca pays Judith a visit, and she immediately tells him about the Franz situation. He nods and agrees about Isabella acting as a double agent, but he warns that Franz might go to great lengths just to prevent her marriage with Rudiger. At this point, Judith begs for Luca's support in her relationship, but Luca can barely care. Nonchalantly, he advises her to worry more about her own grandfather's vehement disapproval of her relationship with Rudiger. And speaking of old Gramps, the royal family find themselves sitting in an emergency meeting called by him. Uh-oh, this doesn't look too good. Apparently, the emergency meeting is all about Judith's engagement with Rudiger. Realizing this, Judith shrinks, embarrassed for occupying the royal family's time. Grandpa, however, remains unfazed and continues to express his disapproval for the relationship. Luckily, Samuel explains that they cannot simply call off the engagement. Rudiger's grand gestures have won the people's hearts, and breaking off his engagement with Judith won't be too good for the imperial family's public image. Josephine then chimes in, pointing out that Rudiger is the most eligible groom, so Judith is actually quite fortunate. Unfortunately, the old Gramps refuses to listen to reason. He then declares waging war on Winterwald, a rash course of action King Patrick immediately opposes. While everyone debates, Luca cuts in, announcing his support for Judith and Rudiger's engagement. Hearing this, Grandpa feels betrayed, while Judith lights up with hope. However, Luca quickly clarifies his solution: accept the engagement but postpone the wedding for so long that it never happens. Ooh, now that's just harsh, little man! Grandpa brightens at this clever plan, but Judith's excitement fades, realizing that Luca never truly supported the match. With the scheme settled, the family meeting winds down. Yet Judith wonders if she will ever get married at all. But to her dismay, Grandpa grins mischievously, preferring that option. This old man is just so funny and endearing. That aside, Judith wonders why Josephine supported her earlier. She could have sworn Josephine hated her considering she wanted her own sister Victoria to end up with Rudiger. I guess she'll have to talk to Josephine about it then. Still, the meeting about her relationship with Rudiger is far from over. The old Gramps continues yapping, thinking that Judith might just want to date Rudiger so she can stay closer to Luca. He then proposes taking Luca from Winterwald permanently and raising him in the palace. He insists that if Luca grows up in Winterwald, he'd become a scoundrel like Jonas. He further argues that it is better for Luca to be educated at the royal palace. Patrick then asks if he intends to give Luca, a son from the collateral line, the same training as that of the royal family. Immediately, both Samuel and Victoria fix their eyes sharply on their grandfather, leaving him stammering to defend himself. Clearing his throat, he then proposes another idea. Charlotte and Luca can get engaged so that Luca can remain with the royal family. Oh my god, just drop it, Gramps! This is getting out of hand! Patrick immediately objects, calling the idea foolish. This then sparks a heated argument between them. Just then, the argument halts when Charlotte speaks up and agrees to the engagement. Samuel and Victoria reassure her not to feel pressured, but Charlotte insists she believes it's the right choice. After all, Luca is the best fit for a husband considering their status and lineage. Baby girl, you're too young! Patrick refuses to accept and urges his father to fix the problem he just started. Now feeling everyone's wrath, the old Gramps then announces the end of the meeting abruptly. Days later, Judith meets with Charlotte just as Victoria desperately requested her to. You see, she had pleaded with Judith to uncover the truth behind Charlotte's sudden decision, since no one else could coax a real answer from her. Judith agreed, but cautioned Victoria that Charlotte was unlikely to reveal much, given their history of nothing more than stiff, formal exchanges. At present, Charlotte wastes no time and tells Judith she already knows that Victoria sent her. Judith tries to reassure her, explaining that Victoria is simply worried about her, and that everyone is still reeling from her sudden decision of getting engaged. She then gently asks if Charlotte only agreed to the engagement because the former king suggested it. Her line of questioning puts Charlotte at ease, and her guard begins to drop. Charlotte confides that she accepted the engagement to shield Josephine from their father's matchmaking, knowing Josephine dreams only of following in their Aunt Melina's footsteps, not of marriage or luxury. But unfortunately, the king believes Josephine needs a wealthy husband to ensure a life of luxury. Judith, puzzled, asks what this has to do with her engagement to Luca. Charlotte then continues, stating that she feels responsible for the pressure on Josephine, since their father chose to take care of her, the youngest, more than the middle child, Josephine. If Charlotte becomes engaged to someone like Luca, his family would look after her, freeing the king to focus on Josephine. The poor child has to mature quickly. Hearing this, Judith is struck by Charlotte's maturity, but also feels sympathy for her, knowing she must live in someone else's shadow. She encourages Charlotte, saying it is perfectly fine not to conform to everyone's expectations. All she has to do is be assertive, just like Luca. After the conversation, Judith begins planning how to approach Josephine about Charlotte's concern. However, Laura interrupts, announcing it's time for her walk. More like walk right into Rudiger's arms. Judith, you sneaky girl. In the garden, Judith greets Rudiger with a smile, and her voice tinged with concern as she asks about his unexpected meeting. He gazes at her with endearing eyes and confesses he misses her terribly. Judith, taken aback by his honesty, steadies herself, amused by how hopelessly romantic Rudiger is. Once composed, Judith invites Rudiger to the bench. As they settle side by side, she playfully leans her head and rests her hand on Rudiger's thigh, making him freeze in surprise as he tries to regain composure. Noticing Rudiger flustered, Judith smiles, pleased by her effect on him. She then asks how he came up with such a grand proposal. Rudiger, sincere and innocent, says he wanted the world to know his feelings for her, and a grand gesture seemed right. Rudiger truly is a romantic. Where else could you find one like him? Later, she proposes a playful game. Each must agree to the other's wishes or face a punishment. As it unfolds, she teases Rudiger by suggesting they only kiss once a month, and predictably, Rudiger refuses, losing the game. As punishment, Judith asks him to lift his head and close his eyes, and he follows her instructions without hesitation. As she gazes at him, her eyes soften with affection, and she wonders how he can trust her so completely when he has no idea what she's about to do. As Judith leans in to kiss Rudiger, she feels her nerves fluttering, realizing just how daring her plan is. Summoning all her courage, she then presses a gentle and brief kiss on his lips. Rudiger is stunned, unable to tear his gaze away from Judith. She then tries to steady her breath, hiding her embarrassment over her bold move. But just as Judith begins to speak, Rudiger suddenly closes the distance and kisses her passionately, catching her completely off guard. Blushing, Judith buries her face in Rudiger's chest, hugging him tightly to hide her flustered expression. Meanwhile, Rudiger gathers his composure and confesses to Judith that she is the only one who can truly move him. Though the feeling is unfamiliar, he admits he enjoys being swept away by her. He tells her that his once colorless life now feels as if it has been painted with vibrant hues. This guy truly knows how to charm his way with words. As Judith listens to Rudiger, she can't help but notice the childish smile on his face. He's like a boy that just discovered his first love. Moved by the moment, she then leans in for a third kiss. Soon, the two say their goodbyes. And just in time, too, because Luca marches straight into the garden. Luca, you're one formidable cockblocker, aren't you? Luckily, Judith isn't caught. But upon arriving, Luca subjects her to a thorough interrogation. Judith calms him down, asking why he was even searching for her in the first place. And to that, he explains that he thought she had run off. Still, Luca is no fool. He glares at Judith intently. Although he didn't catch them together, he knows she was secretly meeting with Rudiger. This is the second time this has happened, and he warns that there should never be a third. The following day, Judith visits Josephine, who wastes no time asking about Judith's intentions. Josephine points out that Victoria might be better suited to handle any problems. However, Judith explains that she specifically wants to discuss an issue with her concerning Charlotte. She goes on to share Charlotte's worries, and as Josephine listens, concern grows for their little peanut, who's trying so hard to act like an adult. Josephine remarks that it is absurd for Charlotte to be engaged at such a young age, and Judith wholeheartedly agrees. Same here, I agree. Afterward, Judith confronts Josephine why she seems so hostile towards her, and Josephine answers bluntly. She despises people who easily get what they want, and Judith is exactly like that thanks to her close relationship with their grandfather. But what really stings is that she acquired the one thing Josephine has long wanted: freedom. Oh, so that's why. Not gonna lie, I kinda understand her, but I hope she knows it wasn't easy for Judith too. Changing the subject, she questions Josephine's true intentions in helping her with Rudiger. However, Josephine does not go into detail, only revealing that she has her own goals. Well, if you and Rudiger do get married, that's one less candidate for a potential groom for Josephine, so I guess that's sort of relieving for her. One last thing, Judith requests Josephine's help in meeting with Samuel. It's a request that puzzles her, so Judith explains. For months, Franz Birkenleis has been targeting the Winterwald family, putting Luca in danger. He's predictable, really, and meeting Samuel might just be his next move. After all, she knows Franz will likely ask Samuel for help in taking Rudiger down. Judith then asks her to pass a message along. If Franz tries to offer a bribe, always have Samuel demand for more but never accept. Only then can they set the stage and finally bring down Franz. This is all new to Josephine. Smiling inwardly, she then realizes that Judith might not be as weak and innocent as she looks. Unlike the chaos in the last few weeks, Judith is having quite an enjoyable day today. Or at least, that's how it would look to an outsider. In reality, though, her grandfather has dragged her to a cricket match against her will, hoping to find her a new lover. One that isn't Rudiger Winterwald. Watching hot men run around doesn't sound like a bad deal to me. Among all the players, it's the star player that gets their attention. Tall, hunky, sporty. It's just a shame his face is obscured by his hair and cap. Still, the former king is 100% confident that he's the perfect match for Judith. That is, until said player takes off his cap and reveals himself to be none other than Rudiger. Nonchalantly, Rudiger greets the royals, as all game champions do. Judith is all heart eyes to see him, but the same can't be said for her grandfather, who stares daggers at her fiancé. He's about to cause a scene, but Rudiger reminds him that there are thousands of people around. It wouldn't be the best time to cause a royal scandal now, would it? Like usual, the two bicker endlessly. And pointlessly, if you ask me. Unfortunately, Grandpa is adamant on finding Judith a new partner. But when Rudiger shows him his own way of scaring away competition, his blood boils with anger. Rudiger quite literally just declared to challenge any man who dares to propose to Judith, and he's let the whole kingdom know, too. Newspapers, tabloids, you name it. He's put up ads all over stating, "Propose to my fiancé and meet your quick and painful end." But hey, if that doesn't work, Rudiger figures he can always just wait for old Gramps to kick the bucket. His words render both Judith and her grandfather speechless, but he manages to soften the blow. To the old Gramps, Rudiger's expression changes to that of sincerity. Wouldn't it work out well if everyone just got along now? Rudiger and Judith would be happy, and he'd live to see his granddaughter in a wedding dress and walk her down the aisle. Though he doesn't admit it, the former king really would love to be in Judith's wedding, even if it is with that darn Winterwald brat he despises. Clearing his throat, he gestures for him and Judith to head home. While he hasn't approved of Rudiger yet, the two lovebirds know they've just managed to win him over. That afternoon, Judith fills Luca in on everything, and boy, is his reaction priceless. He never imagined a man as proud and dignified as his uncle would infiltrate a cricket match just to prove himself to Judith and the former king. Well, what can I say? Your uncle's madly in love with Judith, Luca. By sunset, Judith receives a long-awaited summons. Finally, Samuel has agreed to meet her, and it's all thanks to Josephine's help. Cutting to the chase, Josephine reveals that everything is just as Judith predicted. Franz really did contact Samuel. Turns out, Franz personally met with Samuel to support his claim to the throne and asked for his cooperation in bringing down their rivals. To his dismay, Samuel demanded something in return. A bribe, exactly as Josephine instructed. Knowing he doesn't have much to give, Franz then promised to return with a proper bribe soon. Despite his promise, Samuel reveals that it's already been 10 days since Franz last contacted him. What Samuel doesn't know, though, is that right after their meeting, Franz had decided to resort to unthinkable means just to win Samuel over. But on the way home, his carriage was intercepted by assassins. At present, Judith panics. It's not like Franz to dilly-dally, so why hasn't he come back yet? Did something happen to him? I mean, it's not like we wanted him around, though, right? Amid her overthinking, Laura arrives bearing bad news, and she needs to come to the garden to hear it from Rudiger himself. Apparently, Rudiger was the one who sent assassins after Franz. His reasoning? If he's the root cause of Judith and Luca's problems, then it would be better just to eliminate him once and for all. Hearing such a revelation, Judith is left stunned. She's about to lose her wits when Rudiger suddenly apologizes, admitting that the assassinations failed and Franz managed to get away. Even Judith doesn't know how to react. Until they find Franz's body, they can't rule out the possibility of him being alive. Now that they can't monitor him, there's just no telling what his next move will be. Just then, Luca arrives, and he is not happy to see Rudiger. His anger, however, is short-lived when he finds out about the whole Franz situation. With Franz missing in action, the three can only hope to lure him out, and revealing the palace's hidden passageway might just do the trick. He's going to want to ask Samuel for help, after all. Then again, with or without Samuel, Franz still holds one last trump card: Rudiger's weakness. And no, it's not Judith we're talking about. At the end of the day, Rudiger is still a noble and an imperial soldier. If word gets out that he ordered the assassination of his own family member, well, let's just say things won't end well for him. Just the thought of it makes Judith's blood run cold. She tries to push with the plan of luring Franz out through the secret passageway, but Luca and Rudiger are firmly against it. Having Franz sneak into the palace is too risky. What if he goes after Judith instead of meeting with Samuel? Ugh, there's no telling what a madman like Franz will do. Better to be safe than sorry, Judith. And just like that, both Luca and Rudiger agree on plan protect Judith at all costs. For now, Rudiger will head back and double the troops for the search party. And in the meantime, Judith and Luca need to make sure the passageway gets sealed shut. Aww, I guess that means no more secret garden meetings for our lovebirds. As Rudiger leaves, Judith tells Luca to head back to the room without her. Although hesitant, Luca agrees anyway. Before long, Judith traverses the secret passageway to Victoria's room. It's these very passageways that need to be shut until further notice, and she needs the princess's help to do that. However, before she can even reach Victoria's room, tragedy strikes. An explosion shakes the palace, and behind her, Franz appears, seemingly ready to end her. Just then, Isabella comes running, calling frantically for Judith as rebels have infiltrated the palace. But the moment she sees Franz, her demeanor changes completely. Confidently, she then calls him out for not heeding her words. Oh, hell no! Don't tell me she's a double-crossing bee! Unfortunately, Franz confesses that he never trusted her to bring Judith to him from the start. His words pierce Isabella like an arrow. Everything she had done, she did out of love for him. From getting captured, serving as a maid, and even acting as a double spy. And now, he has the nerve to say he never trusted her? As Isabella pours her heart out, a sickening feeling overcomes Judith. Had she misjudged Isabella the entire time? Was she playing her all along just to get back with Franz? Tears prick the corners of Judith's eyes, but just when she thinks she's been betrayed, Isabella flashes her a knowing look and instantly she backs away slowly. Without warning, Isabella tackles Franz and screams for Judith to run without looking back. Judith sprints, but the screams behind her make her heart clench. Tears sting her eyes as she runs away, remembering Isabella's face when she first came to serve her. Just then, a gunshot fires and Isabella falls silent. This Franz guy makes me sick. He's such a monster! Stepping around her body, Franz advances forward. Then, when all hope seems lost, Imperial guards arrive. Except they aren't, really. They're Franz's own men clad in Imperial uniform. In an instant, they knock Judith unconscious. When she comes to, she finds herself bound and taken to Franz's hideout in the slums of Anthive. With her life in his hands, he's sure the royal family won't dare to oppose him. Judith is appalled by this hostage scheme, but what really takes the win is how he proposes they join forces. In return, Franz promises to get rid of Rudiger for her. Hearing this, everything clicks for Judith. She remembers instructing Josephine and Isabella to spread false information to Franz, stating that she has long wanted to escape Rudiger's hold but can't. It seems that this airhead actually took the bait and believed it. To Franz, it's a perfect deal. He saves Judith from Rudiger, and Judith saves him by clearing his name. After all, the royal family would never forgive him for starting a terrorist infiltration at the palace. But if Judith helps him pin the blame on Rudiger, then he might just get away unscathed. You see, the only reason Franz and his men managed to infiltrate the palace was because of the secret passageways, a secret they found by observing Rudiger's every move from a distance. Franz then smiles menacingly as his plans slowly come into fruition. Soon, he'll be able to eliminate the man who cost him his eye and arm. Judith listens in horror. Feigning cooperation, she agrees to work together, but what she doesn't expect is for Franz to be overly cautious. To make sure she's truly on his side, he proposes a marriage between them. Judith reacts unkindly, but Franz insists he's the better man. He'll be able to protect her and Luca, unlike Rudiger, who carries the blood of a cruel man who murdered his own son. The comment catches Judith off guard, and it's then that Franz reveals the truth. Maximilian Winterwald killed his own son, Jonas. Franz narrates that he, Count Greenhaldt, and Jonas used to be the best of friends. The night before Jonas's death, the three were out drinking and passed out from too much alcohol. When Franz woke up in the early hours of morning, Jonas was nowhere in sight. But outside, riders wearing plague masks had just left the premises, and these riders he knew all too well. Maximilian Winterwald's own henchmen. By late morning, Jonas was found dead from a riding accident, but Franz knew better than that. Maximilian's blood runs through Rudiger's veins. Franz can only fear for the worst, knowing that it'll only be a matter of time before Rudiger turns on Luca too. Faced with such information, Judith asks for more time to think about her answer. Franz agrees and gives her until morning, but his words convey a threat. You better agree or else. Left alone, Judith holds back tears. The humiliation of being reduced to only a tool for Franz's gain weighs heavily on her shoulders. That night, she tries breaking free of her bonds when, all of a sudden, Luca appears outside her cell's window. Huh. Not the knight in shining armor I was expecting, but Luca works too, I guess. Apparently, Isabella had managed to tell him about Judith's capture before succumbing to the blood loss. Right outside, a lone guard waits for them, and soon Rudiger will arrive with the Imperial army to flank the slums. But just when they're about to escape, one of Franz's men catches them. Before he can chase them, Franz arrives behind him, announcing that Rudiger and the army have raided the slums. He orders the man to move Judith, but just as the man looks back, Judith hits him with her shoe. Franz tries to subdue her, but with his injuries still throbbing, he's no match for Judith. Ever so quickly, Judith and Luca escape through the window, but it isn't long before Franz's men catch up to them. Luca manages to weave them into a narrow alley and lock themselves in a rundown room, but it won't be long till they're caught again. Where is Rudiger when we need him? Just then, a slamming at the door makes them flinch. They've been found. Although frightened, she makes Luca promise to never put his life in danger for her sake again, but he says nothing. Soon, Franz and his men manage to break down the door and storm in. Luca can barely defend himself when Franz's subordinates yank him and hand him over to Franz, who cocks a gun at him. Judith watches in horror, pleading with Franz to spare Luca's life. With no other choice, she then surrenders, finally agreeing to marry Franz. Hearing this, Luca is mortified, but Judith merely smiles at him through sad eyes, trying her best to reassure him as she takes her place next to Franz. Then, with lightning speed, Judith unveils a hidden dagger and drives it straight through Franz. Yes, queen! We love a female lead who isn't helpless. Franz stumbles backward and blood gushes out of him uncontrollably. His men are about to retaliate. When Judith convinces them to abandon Franz to save their own skin, they find their loyalty wavering. Just in time, Rudiger and his army arrive, circling them all. Without hesitation, the men then surrender, leaving Franz behind. Their betrayal stings Franz. He laughs bitterly to himself, cursing Rudiger for always getting in his way. But once a madman, always a madman. He's not giving up without a fight, and it's Judith who'll pay the price. In one swift move, he takes his gun from his pocket and points it straight at Judith. A gunshot rings through the air, and Franz staggers weakly as bullets penetrate his skin. Rudiger has just shot him. With Franz being dealt with, Judith finally exhales a breath she's been holding. It's finally over. But soon her knees give out and she falls to the cold, hard ground. Blood stains her hands, and only then does she realize that Franz managed to land a hit on her. Ugh, not gonna lie, Rudiger is really annoying me. He's so slow to act, even Luca has better initiative than him. Before long, Judith's vision blurs, and Luca and Rudiger's voices seem further and further to her hearing. That's right, her life flashes before her eyes, and she finds herself snapping back to the modern world. The truck never hit her, and she continued on with her life until old age claimed her. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer an old woman on her deathbed, but a baby named Judith Mybum. Wait, what? So, you're telling me she was actually born into this world after her real life ended? Now this is interesting. As Judith grew older, memories of her past life faded over time. In her new life, she had a beautiful sister named Larissa. She was the apple of everyone's eye in the village. Judith adored her sister. So you can imagine how angry and disheartened she was when she came home to find her father ready to sell Larissa off to a bunch of noblemen at a ball. Their father treated Larissa like an investment, and it pissed Judith off to no end. Had he not gambled all their money away, her older sister wouldn't have to be used so shamelessly for her looks. Still, Larissa smiled and reassured Judith. Sold off or not, she really did want to attend the ball, so she's going there purely for her own enjoyment. At the ball, Larissa ensnared a charming noble with her looks, and the two spent the night together. At first, Judith was happy for her sister. That is, until that fun one-night stand resulted in Larissa being with child. 3 seasons later, Luca was born, and Larissa's life changed completely. The once most revered girl in the village was now branded as a tramp, and Judith hated everyone for it, including her own father. So when their father kicked the bucket months later, it's no surprise they all felt relieved. Finally, they could live in peace, until life said otherwise and an epidemic hit when Luca was 5. Judith's mother and Larissa succumbed to the disease, and just like that, she was left to care for Luca all alone. For a woman without looks and skills going for her, Judith had to swallow her pride to find work around the village. Oftentimes, men even tried to take advantage of her, thinking she was easy and desperate for money. Her circumstances took a toll on her, and she'd often cry herself to sleep. But even with her own problems, not once did she stop caring for Luca. That is, until she realized Luca might be the spitting image of his father, the same man who ruined her sister's life. And from then on, she treated Luca poorly. Months later, she arrived back home to find a strange man waiting for her. It was Rudiger Winterwald, and he dared to question the way Judith raised Luca. He berated her and deemed her an unfit guardian, leaving Judith offended. Years of pent-up rage rose from Judith as she gave Rudiger a piece of her mind. He had no right to question her like that when the Winterwalds had nothing to do with raising Luca. If he's going to treat her so poorly, he might as well pay her for the years she lost raising their family's heir. Her principles sickened Rudiger, so he threw a bag of gold coins right at her feet. That night, he took Luca, and the rest is history. She didn't possess Judith's body, rather, she was Judith herself. Everything in her life wasn't predetermined by a novel's plot. Rather, it was a life she lived. And when everything flashed before her eyes, Judith was stunned to find herself waking again. Seeing Luca cry for her, Judith could only shed her own tears, apologizing over and over for how she treated him. Okay, I'm still confused. Was she seeing visions of an alternate plot or what? Just then, a shadow of Luca's adult self flashed before Judith. With a sad smile, Luca can only apologize too, admitting that he's also to blame because apparently, everything that's happened to Judith's life so far is Luca's own doing. The scene shifts to a whole different timeline. No doubt the same one we saw in the first chapter of this story. Luca is all grown up, and he's successfully succeeded as the heir of House of Winterwald. Everything is peaceful, and Luca can only breathe out a sigh of contentment. From the corner of his eye, he spots a golden key. The same key that led him to Winterwald's treasure, a chalice that could grant the family head any wish. Luca never believed in its power, but when it begins to pulsate, he finds himself wishing to be happy. Just then, a blinding light envelops the room, and when Luca regains consciousness, he's his 9-year-old self once again. At present, he confesses everything to Judith. This whole do-over is all because he made a wish. All right, let me get this straight. So, that day she first woke up as Judith wasn't because of the truck incident, but rather, that was around the time when Luca made his wish? Gosh, so this is basically like a third life of some sorts. Tears sting Judith's eyes. That awful past she remembered was all true. Yet despite that, Luca still came to save her time and time again in this do-over. It's then that Luca reveals the one thing Judith never knew. Even in the past, when she treated him so poorly and cast him away, he never hated her. Because even back then, she protected him from Franz despite their estranged relationship. How exactly did Judith save Luca from Franz back then? Well, going back to memory lane, Franz admits that seeing Luca alive reminds him of his perfect plan to remove him permanently. A plan that required extensive resources. One of those resources was Judith, whom he recruited under the pretense of destroying the ducal house. The partnership didn't last when Judith realized it meant harming her own nephew. Franz thought she was ludicrous, especially after he paid her a hefty amount. Not until Judith betrayed him, which cost her her life. Yet even her death didn't satisfy Franz's greed, not with Luca standing alive before him. With the huge revelation, Luca is stunned that his own aunt did all that to save him. He never had a good memory with her, and she hated Winterwald. For him, her actions didn't align with his perception of her at all. He cannot ask her about her sacrifice now, especially when she's no longer with him. But her vague, distant affection forces him to reconsider their entire relationship. Perhaps it wasn't rooted in hatred at all. Thus, our current Luca cannot blame Judith for being so harsh with him in the beginning. Plus, he is most grateful for something else. He explains to her that Rudiger's main purpose of taking care of him back then is because he is Jonas's son, but it'll prove to be fruitless because Jonas isn't a real Winterwald? What? So Luca isn't also part of Winterwald right from the very start? It was all written plainly in Duke Maximilian's journal. Everything Rudiger did was in vain, including dying for Luca. The scar runs deep. Luca feels he doesn't deserve to call the man uncle. No wonder he's so adamant about not calling him uncle. But Judith once advised him that what people know of someone isn't the whole truth. After reflection, Luca realizes he has changed, which means the same applies to Rudiger. He can finally understand him from the perspective of his past life. If he had stepped into Rudiger's shoes, he wouldn't live with so many regrets. Luca confesses he only wanted the heir title to end Franz. Now he can finally reveal the truth. He hesitates, afraid it might change his relationship with Rudiger. But his desire to call him uncle one last time is stronger, because he has Judith. She is his courage. He is forever grateful. With her, he is glad to be alive again. Luca goes back to being the strict, nagging nephew he is by stubbornly telling Judith to rest more. The lack of pain she is feeling now is just temporary, and things will become worse. Before she can react to his bold facts, they hear a splash of water coming from Rudiger, who enters the room. He's surprised she is awake, and apparently just her sigh makes him burst into tears. An odd sight we might never get to see next time from this nonchalant man. Judith realizes she was unconscious for 3 days, and in those 3 days, Rudiger didn't sleep a wink. Luca friendly informs her that the dude cried for 3 days straight. Rudiger can't even look her in the eye because he thinks he's already ugly from all the crying. Man, this guy has his priorities straight, aka just Judith. It didn't take long for Rudiger to express his guilt over the recent events and how he acted impulsively. Contrary to his beliefs, Judith can't blame him because she was at fault for not telling him her whole plan. The biggest issue is Franz. And would you look at that, the villain is really dead now! Thank the heavens! But they can't rest easy when the Imperial Palace is still under chaos with the attack and the sudden development. So they took Judith to rest up in the Winterwald's townhouse for her own safety. A much more secured place where soldiers are stationed from left to right, and she's under Rudiger's protection. Plus, this is a good opportunity for Rudiger to hog her all to himself away from the old fart. Jokes aside, it is a blessing in disguise as the Winterwald ban is uplifted because the situation is an emergency. Along with that, the two Imperial heirs are being tested for their abilities in handling the aftermath, which signifies the changes that are incoming for all of them. And Judith's and Rudiger's relationship is no exception. Confirming the sought-after peace, Judith is ready as she tells Rudiger she must tell him something important. With Luca by her side, the two are ready to reveal the long-awaited truth. Slowly, the two speak about their past. Judith explains how she thought she was in a novel. Luca describes his regression through the goblet. Rudiger listens patiently, his warm hands holding them steady. After their confessions, Rudiger admits he already suspected they carried secrets. He didn't push them to share. He never wanted to cause them grief. As a man of silence himself, there are things he also doesn't yearn to speak of. About Jonas, Rudiger reassures Luca that blood doesn't define family. No matter how estranged they were, Jonas remains his brother. Judith understands now why the previous Rudiger pushed Luca away. He was preparing the boy to be strong, ready to sacrifice himself. Rudiger considers this silently. Then he looks Luca in the eye. No matter what happened in his past life or now, Luca will always be his nephew. He'll be happy if Luca continues calling him uncle. Rudiger ruins the moment by asking if Luca can call him uncle-in-law instead. Luca looks at him with pure disgust. There's no doubt Luca will never call him that, unless they actually get married. Things fall peacefully into place. Judith cannot remember her past life, but with Rudiger and Luca's memories, they fill the gaps. It feels like reading a novel. Yet multiple questions linger. How did Luca's memories transfer to her? Why did his wish for happiness lead him to regress? What has become of the goblet? All the answers to the mysteries will all be revealed a month later from an unexpected source. After the day of Franz's demise, the Duke and Duchess of Winterwald came to the capital with the former preparing in front of the imperial family. Sophia also visits once Judith has woken up, which is a complete failure because the once subsided pain became unbearable for our heroine to even croak out a word or two. Then a month quickly passes by, and Judith is finally free from the confinements of bed rest. But first things first, Luca informs them he will be meeting the Duke to officially cancel the adoption papers. He is set on no longer being a Winterwald. Even though he isn't a real Winterwald, Rudiger reassures him he will make a great Duke. Luca tells him that he is merely returning to his original surname as Luca Maibaum. Being heir and Duke was enough for one lifetime, especially with no blood ties to the name. They stand before Duke Maximilian, who cuts through their request as if it were a tedious task. As if her deception and engagement to Rudiger were no big matter. But they aren't here for that. Not wanting to waste their time, Judith kindly requests to revoke Luca's adoption, as the boy doesn't want to become a Winterwald heir. Maximilian doesn't see it as a valid reason, as Rudiger can still become Duke due to the railway rights. On a further note, Luca is Jonas's son, so he is still a Winterwald. Luca chooses that moment to speak up that he is just a stranger to the Duke, as they aren't even related. Maximilian is shocked with how Luca knows of this when he is the only person alive who is aware that Jonas isn't really his own. Luca confesses he turned back time using the goblet and he read Maximilian's journal. Digesting the information, he then laughs boisterously. He has no reason to doubt the boy as he carries the royal blood. Suddenly, in this moment, Judith realizes everything may be answered by the man in front of them. She has the right to know and question after all. Realizing how determined they are to know the truth and the condition, Maximilian falls back on his chair, ready to tell them a story of a trapped bird who all her life wishes for freedom. The truth is finally within our reach. Long ago, or how many eons ago, there lived a powerful man, aka former king, who dotes on his sister Greta. But in a blink of an eye, she left home without any leads for him to search for her. He set his eyes on doting on his own daughter, who shares the same eye color as his sister. Yet he never realized how his daughter, Vanessa, felt suffocated all this time. Living in secrecy, Vanessa lived a life of sleeping around with men. Wow, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Due to the life she is secretly hiding in, she eventually becomes pregnant with no knowledge of who the possible father could be. Desperate to escape from the inevitable future, looking at the only lady friend she can trust, it clicks to Vanessa on what else to do. To make a deal with the man who loved Sophia. Sophia has always devoted herself only to Vanessa, even refusing every marriage proposal from left and right. Maximilian was one of those many admirers who could only watch her from afar. The man has power and wealth, and he is the only person who can handle the former king. With the deal that he is the father of her unborn child, and he can wed Sophia after she disappears, it didn't take long for the two to shake hands. Unfortunately, she didn't get her freedom when she died after childbirth. As for Jonas being the heir, it was solely to please Sophia's wishes, as she dotes on her former employer's son. Are the men of Winterwald so weak against the women they love? But wouldn't this mean Rudiger was robbed of his own rightful position just because his own father chose to prioritize his wife? As for Maximilian, it didn't matter to him who became the next duke, but he couldn't accept their request, all because Luca looks like Vanessa. Judith understands that the man is just in love, but she can't bear the thought that he's not considering Rudiger nor Luca's feelings at all. Always so impassive, Maximilian states it's a matter of debt that Luca owes to the family. The goblet can only be used once, and because Luca used it to get back in time, it means the goblet lost its value. Isn't it just fair he remains a Winterwald then? Whoa, hold on, old man. Is there even a manual that says that? The magic instilled in the goblet is no different from a divine miracle. It would be complete nonsense if it fulfilled every wish for every Duke of Winterwald. Luca pales. He used the goblet even though he wasn't a real Winterwald. Maximilian remains strangely relaxed. He states using the magic was inevitable before launching into an even more ancient story. Dang, who knew this man was such a storyteller when he barely had lines before? 2,000 years ago, a powerful hero with immense magic appeared. She saved the world whenever chaos ensued. She became the founding queen of Rumgard. The Duchy of Winterwald became her vassal, and under her reign, the continent enjoyed a golden age. But things don't last forever. As the queen aged, one of her ordinary, incapable children committed a despicable act. He sought a magician to seal the queen's magic inside a vessel, the goblet. She executed her son and the magician after noticing her powers depleting, but it was too late. Her cunning son had cast a restriction spell. A spell that only her descendants could use the goblet, except the queen herself. The moral of the story is that only royal Rumgard blood can make wishes with the goblet. Luca is part of the royal family, and his wish came true because of that fact. All that storytelling for nothing? How did the goblet end up with the duchy in the first place then? The queen wished to destroy it, but with so much of herself inside, she couldn't. She sealed the cup instead, ensuring no one could use it, and chose the Winterwald family as eternal guardians. Not her own family. The current Rumgards are insane enough to guess how terrible her children were. Magical objects can manipulate people. The duchy were chosen for their strong mental fortitude. People that are not easily consumed by greed or power. Only the Winterwalds are aware of the existence of the goblet. But Maximilian made Jonas heir even though he had Rumgard blood. That didn't make sense until Judith suddenly turned pale as she grasped the bigger picture. Fear and determination consume her as she asks if the Duke killed Jonas, and if the goblet still had its power, would he kill Luca too? Maximilian doesn't waver from her relentless questioning, even after knowing Franz told her. Franz and Jonas were always close, and he is aware the two were together before Jonas's death. He stands and turns to them with a straight face before he confirms it. He did kill Jonas. What What? So it's true? And I thought Franz was crazy! A strong, ominous energy radiates from Maximilian. Jonas's death, he reasons, was because he was greedy and foolish. Unlike Judith's assumption, the Duke reminds everyone he never cared who became heir or who used the goblet. His only concern was what Jonas openly wished for: the wish to become king, an act of treason. Among all the blondes in this manhwa, Jonas is by far the most unhinged. He genuinely believed he was above everyone else, convinced his veins held the perfect combination of Winterwald and Rumgart blood. His wish was loud, ambitious, and treasonous. Despite Maximilian's warnings, Jonas kept running his mouth until he crossed the line. He spouted rudely about Duchess Sophia, who cared for Jonas as her own, more than her biological son. Yet Jonas viewed her as useless, a mere maid. That wasn't the worst part. He openly declared he would get rid of Sophia once he became king. Jonas never had a good reputation, but if he had been the one to use the goblet, it would have led to total chaos. He was the personification of nastiness in every form. I would have done the same if I were the Duke, too. Before settling things, Maximilian asks Luca what happened to Sophia in his past life. Luca confesses she passed away, grieving over Rudiger's death. Maximilian soon followed, seeing no purpose in living without her. Sophia cared for Rudiger more than the family ever realized. The Duke agrees to revoke Luca's adoption, on one condition: no one in the room breathes a word of this to Sophia. Who would, when it would shatter her heart to know what Jonas truly thought of her? He walks away coolly, coat sweeping behind him, then stops and turns to gently pat Luca's head. He is grateful for Luca's wish. If not for him, none of them would be happy now. After the Duke left, Rudiger couldn't help but wonder if Maximilian purposely told them his secrets. Because if he were afraid if word would get out to Sophia, he wouldn't have told a soul at all. It seemed he was prepared to confide his innermost secrets. Judith can only imagine he did so because of Rudiger. She expresses concern over him if he were hurt by Sophia's choices in life. True to his words, Rudiger respects his mother, and he believes Sophia may have already known, as she knows Jonas best. All he feels is pity for his older brother. He didn't expect Jonas to meet his end when he had so much in his life. You shouldn't, Rudiger. He's despicable. Jonas totally deserved all that because of his stupid choices in life. However, Rudiger is thankful towards Jonas because without him, he won't be able to find his happiness. Her. Left speechless with his logic, Judith can't help but wonder if Rudiger is just forcing himself to accept things because he's used to it. Noticing the strained look on her face, Rudiger mentions that Jonas would never know what he lost, especially with a good kid like Luca. Though I can never imagine Jonas being a father that steps up or sets an example. In fact, Judith likes to think Rudiger is Luca's father with the numerous similarities they share. Blood-tied or not, the family resemblance is undeniably there. A few days later, Judith finally visits the former king. She wasn't allowed to see him when he's so obsessed with her presence? He looks at her with relief, then guilt. He failed to protect her, didn't even know she was kidnapped in his own home. His stubbornness nearly cost him the same mistake twice. He confesses his deep loathing for the Winterwald family. It began when Maximilian was arranged to marry Vanessa. He suspected she was pregnant, perhaps coerced. He approved the marriage but never trusted the Duke. To ensure his daughter's safety, he proposed the railroad concession, but it would fail utterly when Vanessa died. However, upon hearing Rudiger is the one who saved her, he realizes how the man was brave enough to refute him for love. It is undeniable that Rudiger will make her happy. The former king approves of their marriage, and Judith can see how relaxed he is now. Rudiger, upon hearing the blessing, immediately prepares the wedding before the old man changes his mind. But first things first, Victoria explains the Birkenleys family is in ruins. With Franz's death and the family already at rock bottom with no heir in sight, Judith proposes a solution. Isabella becomes the legitimate wife, and Dobby becomes the next count, as long as they must conceal Franz's crimes. Isabella agrees, anything for Dobby to live comfortably. The Birkenleys family cannot afford to be picky anyway, as Dobby is Franz's only son. If they refuse, the royal family will destroy them. The chaos at the Imperial Castle is officially reported as an unfortunate accident. including Franz's death, a decision made by noble society. At long last, everything is peaceful, and Judith is ready to go home. The day we've all been waiting for has arrived. The wedding day. Judith anxiously waits in the waiting room, realizing she has absolutely no friends outside her eccentric family. Then an unexpected guest arrives, the crowned princess of Botong, which is Leah? She became a princess too? Leah reveals she also went abroad to find a good man. She came to congratulate Judith, who hastily got married without inviting anyone. Aw, Judith does have real friends in her hometown. At the altar, Rudiger looks more handsome than ever. Judith can't believe this is happening. It feels like a dream. She truly feels like the protagonist of a romance novel. The wedding celebration passes quickly. The officiating declares them husband and wife. Before anyone can cheer, Rudiger raises his hand, and purple snow falls from the ceiling. Diamond and pearl powder. The same scene resembles when they first arrived at Winterwald. Judith is insanely in love with her weirdo of a man who could absolutely do it in a normal gesture. She grabs him by the collar and kisses him on the lips. In the corner of her eye, she sees Larissa's spirit happily clapping for her happiness. Judith is certain she has truly changed the genre of the novel. Luca can say the same, with revenge being no longer his goal. In the cold, windy, thorny path he had to survive, spring finally blooms in his heart. For the first time, Luca smiles genuinely in joy. What a beautiful ending! I don't know about you, but this is one of my favorite stories ever. I laughed so much reading this one. I'm so glad I was able to finally complete it. If you want more complete stories, please consider joining our channel membership. It really helps us bring you the content you love, and it comes with many perks. You can check the membership tiers in my channel. Have a wonderful day, and see you in the next one!